Chapter 1566. Previously, he was still the arrogant new chief who had just ascended the throne. Now, Gary was deserted by everyone and became a rat's poop that no one wanted to taint. The sudden contrast caused many people to feel a little uncomfortable. "So, whose conferring ceremony are we attending today?" Haebang asked softly. "Look, isn't that Mr. Mac, little boss, and the rest?" Haege asked as he pointed at a few figures in the crowd. "Looks like it." Haebang looked in the direction where he was pointing, and saw the familiar white twin ponytails. He nodded. Meg looked at Oster and Ferdinand, who was smirking on the gallows, and narrowed his eyes slightly. The development of the matter was indeed beyond his expectations in many aspects. Ferdinand's impassioned speech had won over the support of the ordinary orcs. Basil's fatal betrayal had severely injured Gary, and then said that classic line. Oster, who was supposed to be on Gary's side, chose to watch from the sidelines and not interfere in this matter. It was as if he was watching Gary fail completely. Meg wasn't so naive to believe that all of this was just a coincidence. The aura of a conspiracy was gathered and concentrated on Ferdinand. This skinny young man had obviously been in control of the situation today from the beginning to the end. He completed the counterattack step by step and established his authority and status. He was so scheming that he did not seem like the young man. Meg even felt that he had some connection with Oster. The Kingslayer was deserted by everyone, and the prince returned to save his people from the abyss of suffering. He became the new chief who was loved by the people. This drama seemed to be quite good. "Wow, looks like Connie's brother is a very powerful person. We didn't even have to do anything to subdue the bad guy," Yebamia praised. "Then, did Big Sister Connie receive the news in advance, so she didn't come?" Amy asked curiously. Meg also thought of a possibility when he heard that. If Connie had met Ferdinand last night, and the two of them had interacted, then everything would make sense now that she didn't appear in the group that was going to kidnap the chief. However, Meg still felt that something was amiss. Where did the evil aura on Ferdinand come from? If Gary died today, then the source and clues of the black fog would point to Ferdinand. This was something that couldn't be ignored or ignored. Having lost his power, his subordinates' loyalty, and his powerful external aid, Gary clutched his chest as he stood up shakily. He looked at Ferdinand with a gloomy smile, and said in a self-deprecating manner, "Even Isaiah died in my hands. I didn't expect that I would fall in the hands of a brat like you. I really didn't expect you to be so shrewd and capable. Even my most trusted subordinate has become your man." Ferdinand calmly said, "The Falk tribe is loyal to Lord Flurkin. They only listened to Lord Flurkin's choice. Gary, you were destined to fail the moment you started to go against Lord Flurkin's will and choice. The beast god doesn't exist. There was no god in this world. Evil and terror will descend eventually. No one can stop all of this." Gary suddenly exclaimed agitatedly. He looked around at everyone with a creepy smile on his face. He grabbed the short sword that had pierced into his chest, and pulled it out forcefully before stabbing it into his own heart with a creepy smile on his face. "Everyone has to die. Everyone has to die." The horrifying whisper lingered in everyone's ears for a long time before dispersing. Gary's corpse fell to the ground slowly as blood flowed out from his body. His eyes were still open as he looked at the pitch-black night sky with a creepy smile on his face as if he was welcoming something. Everyone looked at Gary's corpse with fear on their faces. What did he mean by saying those words before he died? It made them feel terrified. Terror and evil will descend eventually. Everyone has to die. Meg looked at Gary's lifeless corpse, and felt a little regretful that he couldn't get more information about the black fog and evil from him. If this was the final boss, Meg felt that there was still something missing. Meg glanced at the mission tab in his mind. The mission to clear the black fog was still at 0. This meant that Gary's death had no effect on the black fog mission. In other words, he wasn't the source of the black fog at all. Gary's death cast a terrifying shadow on everyone, and the scene fell into an eerie silence. Ferdinand went forward and sorrowfully said, "The Kingslayer Gary has been executed. This is to comfort my father, Chief Isaiah, and all the innocent tribesmen who died in the rebellion and massacre." Darrell went forward and loudly said, "Gary is a shameless Kingslayer and a scourge to the tribe. We are willing to serve young Master Ferdinand as our chief." Kurt also quickly went forward and loudly said, "We are willing to serve young Master as our chief." Basil bowed and said, "Young Master Ferdinand is Chief Isaiah's only son, so you are the best candidate for the chief. We are willing to serve you as our chief. We are willing to serve young Master as our chief." All the Fog tribe members at the scene shouted as they knelt on the ground. All the orcs looked at Ferdinand with sparkling eyes as if they had chosen a wise ruler for themselves. The atmosphere was very lively and excited. Gary's era was killed right after it started, and Ferdinand's era was about to begin. Devold wiped his tears and murmured, "Old chief, we didn't let you down. Young Master will succeed you as the new chief, and continue to lead the Fog tribe forward." Oster stood up and lamented, "I didn't expect to witness such a moment. Chief Isaiah and I can be considered old friends. I am very glad to see that his son can succeed his position. Everything is prepared here today. Why don't we let young Master Ferdinand be conferred the title on the spot? The evil aura on him is growing rapidly. It seems like he has just absorbed the fearful emotions of everyone present." Irina's grave voice sounded in Meg's ears. "Absorbing fearful emotions to become stronger." Meg looked at Ferdinand with a grave expression as well. It seemed like he was the mission target, the real owner of the black fog. "I am still young, and I am not powerful enough. How can I be the chief of the Fog tribe? Please elect a more capable and powerful tribesman to be the chief to lead the Fog tribe, and not weaken the tribe's prestige and reputation," Ferdinand said humbly. His gaze met Oster's briefly, and both of their lips curled up at the same time. "You are indeed not worthy to be the chief. Otherwise, the souls of your father, mother, and grandmother will not be able to rest in peace." Right at this moment, a cold voice sounded, and a petite figure walked out from the crowd, and lifted the black cloak on her body. Chapter 1567. Princess Connie. All the orcs exclaimed when they saw the young lady in black who suddenly walked forward. She had a petite figure, slightly curly hair, and pinkish-white orc ears that stood upright under the light of the fire. That adorable face seemed a little solemn now as she stared at Ferdinand. Connie's sudden appearance did surprise many orcs. After all, there had been news from the start that Princess Connie and Chief Isaiah had died in the rebellion together. But now, she was standing here alive and well, and saying such unexpected words to young Master Ferdinand. One had to know that young Master Ferdinand had reprimanded Gary for many of his crimes, and had influenced Gary's trusted aides and the rebel army. Only after killing Gary did he manage to escape from danger, and was about to become the new chief of the Fog tribe. "Connie! You're still alive." Ferdinand was also stunned for a moment when he saw Connie. Then, he excitedly said, "That's great. I was so afraid that I would be the only one left in this world. Luckily, you're still here." That sincere smile and affectionate gaze all revealed an elder brother's concern for his younger sister. It made one feel emotional and touched. Yes, Princess Connie was the apple of the Fog tribe's eye. She was deeply doted on by Chief Isaiah, and was also doted on by young Master Ferdinand. Perhaps the things that happened recently had a huge impact on her, and that was why she had such a change. This lass. Oster squinted at Connie with a hint of doubt and danger. Meanwhile, the chiefs and representatives of the various tribes all kept quiet and observed the situation. Seems like Connie has also discovered something. Meg looked at Connie's back view, which was clenching her fists tightly, and fell into deep thought. She must have already known that everything would happen if she could hide in the crowd until now. I didn't expect her to disguise herself so well. I thought she was an old lady. Camilla's helpless voice sounded from the earpiece. Little girl, you even tricked me. Your innate ability is indeed not bad. In the crowd far away, Lex muttered to herself, feeling gratified. However, her gaze towards Ferdinand was filled with doubt. She could sense a familiar aura from him, which made her feel slightly uneasy. However, she could not recall what it was at that moment. Ferdinand, don't you feel ashamed when these words come out of your mouth? Connie looked at Ferdinand, and pursed her lips. You must be very disappointed that I didn't die, right? There was a sudden silence. Everyone between Connie and Ferdinand had already retreated. The orcs looked at Connie and Ferdinand uneasily, not understanding why the atmosphere between this pair of siblings who had only reunited after going through so much hardship was so strange. The smile on Ferdinand's face also gradually stiffened, but it quickly changed into a pained expression. He looked at Connie, and said, It's all Big Brother's fault for not being able to protect you well. If Father and the rest knew about this, they would definitely not forgive me. Connie, don't worry. From today onwards, Big Brother will protect you well. I won't let anyone hurt you anymore. All the orcs heaved a sigh of relief. Ferdinand was indeed a very gentle and responsible person. Since he was so warm and kind to his sister, he would definitely treat his people like Chief Isaiah. Don't pretend to be kind. I saw it in Grandmother's diary. Connie took out a thick parchment book and a piece of bloody cloth from the cloth bag at her waist. She raised it high above her head, and pointed her fair finger at Ferdinand. With reddened eyes, she said, You are no longer my big brother Ferdinand. You were bewitched by the devil, and gave your soul to an evil and terrifying existence. It was you who bewitched Gary and made him lead the troops to rebel and kill everyone in the palace. It was you who bewitched Basil and made him kill Gary. All of this was your scheme. You used Gary to kill Father, killed Grandmother who saw your scheme, killed my mother, and killed everyone who was familiar with you. You must be very disappointed that I didn't die, right? Ferdinand, you don't deserve to be the chief of the Falk tribe. You will make the Falk tribe be bewitched by the devil like the Erba tribe back then. We will fall into a frenzy of internal strife, and destroy everything in the end. I can't. I can't watch you destroy everything that Father protected with all his life. There was dead silence at the scene. The orcs looked at the parchment book and the bloody cloth above Connie's head with shock and confusion. Was everything that Princess Connie said true? The Erba tribe. Billy, the chief of the Blue Sky tribe, suddenly stood up, and looked at Connie in disbelief. One of his close friends back then was one of the 10th-tier powerhouses in the Erba tribe. He had personally rushed to the scene on the day that the Erba tribe was attacked. The extremely tragic scene would still flash through his mind occasionally. He couldn't imagine what exactly happened there to cause such a horrifying scene. He almost didn't see a complete corpse. The horrifying wounds seemed to have been torn apart by some wild beast. There wasn't a single survivor in the entire tribe. What was even more horrifying was the expressions of those corpses. They all had a twisted and horrifying smile on their faces. There was no fear. They were smiling. This incident shocked the orcs, and the horrifying scene caused quite a bit of panic. Later on, there was news that the hairless monk had massacred the Erba tribe in order to take revenge. Many pieces of evidence were unearthed, and this incident was finally concluded. However, as someone who had been to the scene and seen those mutilated corpses with his own eyes, Billy had always been suspicious of this conclusion. He couldn't get rid of all his doubts even after the hairless monk was captured. However, according to what Connie said now, the Urba tribe wasn't massacred by the hairless monk. Instead, they were bewitched by the evil god and the devil, which led to a horrifying internal strife. Those bite marks, scattered limbs, and their horrifying expressions after death. Billy's gaze landed on Gary's corpse on the platform. Yes, it was that corpse with its eyes wide open and a creepy smile on its face. Billy felt as if his heart was suddenly squeezed, and his breathing became rapid. If all of this was true, did that mean that the devil really existed? Debbie. Rex looked at the diary that Connie was holding up high, and clenched his fists tightly. He suddenly understood why he found Ferdinand's aura familiar. The memories that he had purposely buried suddenly surged up. On that horrifying night, the thick black fog above the Urba tribe had this kind of aura that made people go crazy. So that's how it is. Meg's train of thought was also cleared up immediately. He couldn't help but look at Connie's petite back view with heartache. The day and night that they lost contact with her must have been very torturous for her. Seems like you were really frightened during this period of time. Ferdinand's expression didn't show the slightest bit of guilt because of Connie's accusation. Instead, he had a pained and self-reproachful expression as he instructed the orc beside him, "Bring Connie away first and take good care of her. I will bring the best doctor to treat her later." Chapter 1568. Ferdinand dismissed Connie's behavior as a mischievous act caused by excessive shock. The orcs were deep in thought after hearing that. Compared to the polite and composed Ferdinand, what Princess Connie said was indeed a little alarmist and illogical. Using the Urba tribe as a comparison was even more puzzling. The orcs from the various tribes who had seen the Urba tribe's massacre with their own eyes couldn't help but be deep in thought. They would never forget that scene for the rest of their lives. It indeed didn't look like a normal massacre scene. Even if it was a massacre, it wouldn't be so horrifying. Father once said that the Urba tribe couldn't have been massacred by the hairless monk alone. Could it really be like what this young lady said, that they were bewitched by the devil? Haybang asked softly with surprise. "We can't come to a conclusion. We'll ask Father when we get back." Haga had taken out a photo stone, and filmed Gary's corpse on the platform for a while before aiming it at Ferdinand again. Did this chap really make a deal with the devil? The thing he wants to give me, could it be? Oster's eyes also narrowed slightly as he fell into deep thought as he looked at Ferdinand. "I'm here to escort Princess Connie back to the palace to rest." Kurt walked towards Connie first as he couldn't wait to show his loyalty to the new chief. The people around them took a few steps back instinctively as if they wanted to keep a distance from Connie. Connie opened the blood letter in her hand, and angrily said to Ferdinand, "Ferdinand, are you feeling guilty? This is the blood letter grandmother left in her room. She wants me to stay away from you and the tribe. She has already foreseen the future of the Falk tribe. She knows I can't stop all of this, so she wants me to escape from here and from your side." The bloodstain was already brown, but from the messy handwriting, it was obvious that the person who wrote this blood letter was in a state of panic. If this was really written by Madame Debbie, what did that mean? "Princess Connie, let me bring you back to the palace to rest. You must be exhausted." Kurt walked towards Connie with a smile, and reached his hand out to her. "Take back your dirty hands, you bastard." An angry roar sounded like thunder. Kurt's expression changed drastically, and he subconsciously put his hands in front of him. A large shoe appeared in front of him, stepped on his hand that was blocking in front of him, and kicked him in the face. Kurt's face instantly deformed as he was stomped into the ground with a horrified expression. Bang! Gravel flew everywhere, and a deep pit appeared on the ground. Kurt's 2 feet were raised high, twitching unnaturally a few times. A tall, short-haired orc appeared in front of Connie, stepping on Kurt's head with one foot. His resolute face was like that of a thunder god, imposing without being angry. This. All the orcs looked at Kurt, who had been stomped into the ground, in shock. This was the 10th tier powerhouse of their folk tribe, Lord Kurt. How could he be stomped into the ground so easily? Who exactly was this fellow? Hairless monk. Daryl exclaimed when he saw the orc that suddenly appeared. They had just exchanged blows last night, so he naturally could recognize who that person was. He looked at Rex with shock and anger, and said, "You came here to save young Master Ferdinand last night. Now that young Master Ferdinand is here, why did you hurt Kurt?" Hairless monk. All the orcs were in an uproar when they heard that. The orcs around them even retreated tens of meters away as they looked at that short-haired orc who was stomping on Kurt in front of Connie with horror. The hairless monk's infamy had only increased over the past few hundred years. He was still the #1 villain in the Twilight Forest. He was someone who could stop children from crying at night with just his name alone. Back then, the Urba tribe was annihilated. It was a horrifying scene, and the main culprit was this fellow in front of them. But wasn't he imprisoned in Chaos City's Bowtie prison after he was caught? Why was he here? And why did he attack Kurt? Rex. I didn't expect you to still dare to appear in the Twilight Forest. Oster also stood up immediately, and shouted at Rex. All the representatives from the various tribes couldn't sit still anymore. They all stood up and looked at Rex cautiously with nervous expressions. "I am her master. Why do you think I have to stomp on him?" Rex turned to Ferdinand with a grave expression and said, "Debbie is right. The evil aura on you is no different from the black fog that gathered above the Urba tribe that day. It came from the devil. Welcoming the devil's arrival will bring a destructive disaster to the tribe. The Urba tribe is a good example. Connie came back to save you, but you sold your soul to the devil. You killed your father in such a way to ascend to the throne. You forced Debbie to her death. A fellow like you should be executed. Is it really the devil who is causing trouble?" Billy looked at Rex. He had always wanted to kill Rex to avenge his best friend for the past few hundred years, but now, he couldn't help but start to doubt if the crime he had set on Rex back then was right. Ferdinand looked at Rex with a tinge of fear in his black eyes. He took 2 steps back instinctively, but he quickly stopped himself and calmed down. He looked at Connie with a sorrowful expression and said, "Connie, why did you acknowledge a sinner as your master? No wonder you would say those words earlier. I don't blame you. You must have been brainwashed by the hairless monk. If there really is a devil in this world, then he must be the scariest one. Otherwise, he wouldn't have wiped out the Urba tribe, and even cut open the stomach of a newborn child. Yes. A devil actually dares to slander young master like that." Princess Connie actually acknowledged the hairless monk as her master. This is simply a disgrace to the tribe. The orcs from the folk tribe chimed in as they looked at Rex with hatred and fear. They also looked at Connie with disgust. Almost everyone was standing on Ferdinand's side, and the voices of doubt had almost disappeared. Ferdinand looked at all the chiefs and representatives with a sincere expression, and loudly said, "All the chiefs and powerhouses present, Ferdinand, represent the folk tribe, and earnestly request all of you to subdue the devil, the hairless monk, so that the folk tribe won't repeat the same mistake as the Urba tribe back then after suffering a calamity and suffering severe losses. The folk tribe will remember this kindness forever." When the chiefs heard this, they all looked hesitant. This matter had nothing to do with them, but the appearance of the hairless monk, Rex, made the entire orc race unable to extricate themselves from this. Compared to Rex's excuse for himself, Ferdinand's request and words were obviously more convincing. The Tadera tribe is willing to support the folk tribe. The Dino tribe supports the folk tribe. The Nanmu tribe supports the folk tribe. All the powerhouses from the various tribes walked out and shouted loudly. Ferdinand curled his lips slightly. No matter how powerful the hairless monk was, could he really take on 10 of them? However, his expression was still extremely righteous, as if he was willing to sacrifice himself for the tribe any time. Master, why don't they believe us? Connie looked at Rex's broad back as tears flowed uncontrollably from her reddened eyes. This is why I didn't want to say it back then. After so many years, this batch of orcs is even worse than that batch back then. Rex smiled with a hint of helplessness in his smile. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 1569. Connie, step back. The orcs are going to exterminate the hairless monk today to avenge the souls of the Urba tribe who died tragically back then. Ferdinand said to Rex as he pointed at him. The orcs from various tribes had already drawn their weapons, and the powerhouses from the Falk tribe were also looking at Rex with hatred. Everyone seemed to be on Ferdinand's side. These baddies are bullying Big Sister Connie together. I'm going to blow them all up into the sky. Amy said angrily as she took out her fire lotus bombs. Get ready. The first objective is to bring Connie out of here safely, and the second objective is to capture Ferdinand, Meg said with a serious expression as he pressed down on the long sword hidden under his loose robe. Tonight's events were full of ups and downs, and had completely exceeded all his previous plans. However, things were gradually getting clearer. Ferdinand was definitely related to the Black Fog, and it was unavoidable to have a confrontation with him in order to exterminate the Black Fog. It was just that he made use of his powerful ability to empathize, and the orcs' inherent impression and fear of Rex to successfully make most of them join the ranks of exterminating the devil willingly, tipping the balance of power between both parties. You said the hairless monk represents evil, and everything he said is a lie. What about me? Right at this moment, a sarcastic voice sounded from above the square. A faint golden light flashed, and Irina appeared above the square, hovering in midair. Irina! Someone exclaimed as everyone looked at Irina, who was wearing a long white dress and shrouded in a faint golden light. Irina's legend had never stopped during this period of time. No matter if it was fighting multiple 10th-tier powerhouses with Alex in Rodu, killing the Spatial Patriarch, establishing the Night Elves, killing Borg in a desperate situation, or leading the elven slaves out of the Wind Forest in a shocking manner. But, why did she appear at the Falk tribe? What did she mean by what she said? Ferdinand was also a little surprised by Irina, but he quickly said, Your Highness, Princess Irina, the Falk tribe and the Wind Forest have always been friendly. May I know what brings you here today? The orcs from various tribes also stopped and looked at Irina. This woman was the worst woman in the world to mess with. Even the Wind Forest was torn apart by her, not to mention that she had Alex, who could kill the Void Ancestor with a single slash. I came to destroy evil. The God of Light and the God of Life have granted me power and responsibility, allowing me to identify and cleanse all evil existences. Irina looked at Ferdinand with a pure expression and a cold voice. I've discovered evil in your body. It's a power and aura that doesn't belong to this world. I suspect that you've made a deal with the devil and sold your soul. How is this possible? She's just talking nonsense, isn't she? How could young Master Ferdinand sell his soul to the devil? But Irina represents the God of Light and the God of Life. She must be very sensitive to evil. What she saw might really be real. There was an uproar instantly. Compared to Rex, who was seen as an evil and terrifying existence, Irina's words seemed to carry more weight, and no one could refute them directly. It was undeniable that Irina and Alex had left many legends when they traveled the continent all these years. They punished evil and promoted good, and were seen as the embodiment of justice. Her sudden appearance in the Falk tribe and her accusation that Ferdinand sold his soul to the devil really stunned the orcs of the Falk tribe. Princess Irina, please mind your words. Although my power is insignificant, and the Falk tribe has gone through a calamity, I am Isaiah's son, the young master of the Falk tribe. Ferdinand looked at Irina seriously and said, I will never agree to your unreasonable accusations and forcing the blame on me. The Falk tribe and the orcs will never agree to it either. Today, the Falk tribe has gone through a calamity. I have lost my most important kin, and the tribe has lost the best chief. How can the Falk tribe's dignity be trampled on by people like you? The orcs of the Falk tribe were instantly agitated, and echoed Ferdinand loudly. All the orcs of the other tribes were also scrutinizing Irina. Her appearance was too much of a coincidence. If Gary sold his soul to the devil, it could still be explained, but how could Ferdinand, who was the victim, be the devil? Glib words won't change anything. Irina looked at Ferdinand, and raised the magic caster's staff in her hand. Golden light started to gather, and she smilingly said, whether you sold your soul to the devil or not, we only need a beam of holy light to know. All evil has nowhere to hide under the holy light. Irina, this is our orc race's matter. Aren't you meddling too much? Oster walked forward, and looked at Irina with a dark expression. Who are you to meddle in our orc race's matters? You stirred up trouble in the Wind Forest, and now you want to stir up trouble in the Twilight Forest. Irina looked at Oster coldly, and said, if he sold his soul to the devil, then this is no longer an orc race's matter. This is a matter that threatens the survival of the entire Norland continent. Why can't I meddle in it? Oster said with a dark expression, today's matter is not something you can meddle in. The Falk tribe has gone through a calamity. How can we allow you to be unreasonable and hurt innocent people? Oster and the August tribe will not agree to this. You still have as much bullshit as you did back then. Rex disappeared on the spot, and a fist the size of a sandbag appeared in front of Oster with a loud explosion. Oster's reaction was very fast. As he retreated, he also raised his fist to meet Rex's fist. Bam! With a dull thud, the powerful force formed an energy ripple that exploded in the air. The surrounding people were blown away, and the ground sank by 1/2 meter. Oster was forced to retreat tens of meters, and his legs left a deep trench on the ground before he could stabilize himself. Meanwhile, Rex had already appeared in front of him again. Sonic booms kept sounding, and the two of them had already turned into two shadows. Only the dull thuds of the fists landing on their bodies could be heard. The sudden battle between Rex and Oster silenced all the voices of opposition. Irina's magic caster's staff was already glowing with golden holy light. Panic finally appeared on Ferdinand's face, and he ordered, Irina intends to kill me and overthrow the Falk tribe. Stop her. Protect young Master Ferdinand. Daryl shouted. He waved his magic caster's staff, and an ice barrier appeared above Ferdinand's head. Meanwhile, Basil was charging towards Irina with a metal rod in his hand. Holy light, let all evil have nowhere to hide. Irina chanted loudly, and pointed her magic caster's staff at Ferdinand. A bright golden holy light pierced through the ice barrier, and landed on Ferdinand, who had a horrified expression on his face. Chapter 1570. The dazzling holy light descended from the sky, penetrated the ice barriers, and landed on Ferdinand. Everyone's gaze subconsciously followed the direction of the holy light. This was the purest light in the world. Even the orcs had to admit it. Light elemental magic casters were extremely rare, and those who could master the holy light spell were even rarer. All of them were blessed by the god of light. That legendary god who was at odds with evil represented justice and light. The holy light represented light. It could cleanse a person's soul and eliminate evil. It wasn't very aggressive to normal people, but it was a sharp sword to evil. Most of the orcs in the Falk tribe still trusted Ferdinand. Since the holy light had already landed, it would naturally prove his innocence. By then, Irina would have to apologize for what she had done. Connie looked at Ferdinand with reddened eyes. She clenched her fists tightly, and her body was trembling slightly. Meg glanced at Irina, who was floating in the air. He entrusted Amy to Elizabeth, and left quietly with the excuse of finding a way out. Rex and Oster, who were fighting fiercely, punched each other, and took over 10 steps back at the same time. They stopped and looked at Ferdinand with tacit understanding. The pure golden holy light emitted a dazzling radiance as it landed on Ferdinand's body. No! Ferdinand's expression instantly twisted, and the hidden black fog could no longer hide. It was as if many black snakes had darted out from his body, twisting into terrifying ghostly faces in the holy light before they were disintegrated and dissipated by the holy light. Keek keek keek, terrifying demonic roars came from those broken ghostly faces, making one's soul tremble. What is this? Why would the holy light shine on something like this? Why would young Master Ferdinand have such a terrifying thing on him? Oh my God! Did young Master Ferdinand really trade his soul with the devil? The orcs around Ferdinand retreated in horror. Their faces were filled with astonishment as they looked at Ferdinand, whose expression was distorted in the holy light. Within the pure holy light, Ferdinand's twisted and crazy expression was terrifying. Meanwhile, the ghostly face formed by the strange black fog made it hard not to associate it with a terrifying devil. Everyone suddenly realized that what Irina said might be true. The holy light was enough to prove everything. How could this be? The expressions of the chiefs and representatives of the various tribes changed drastically when they saw this scene. Demons only existed in legends, but they couldn't refute what they had just seen. If the existence of the devil was proven to be true, and Ferdinand had exchanged souls to bewitch Gary into killing the king, then what Connie had said about the incident at the Urba tribe was really due to the devil's involvement, causing the entire tribe to kill each other. Princess Irina is right. There is indeed something wrong with the black fog on him. It exudes an evil aura, and it's similar to what Gary showed just now. Billy raised his hand and pointed at the charging Basil. Countless vines rapidly grew from the ground and formed a wall in front of him in the blink of an eye. Basil tried to dash over, but he was suddenly surrounded by layers of vines that wrapped around him. Ferdinand lifted his head slowly, and a circle of red light lit up around his pure black eyes. He looked at Irina and grinned. You can't kill me. I am the god of darkness, and I am everywhere. You are just a remnant thought that possessed a coward's body now. You really think of yourself as an evil god. Irina pursed her lips in disdain. She raised her magic caster's staff again, and chanted, God of light, please bestow upon me the power of the holy light to cleanse the world of all evil and darkness. A beam of holy light that was even brighter and larger than before suddenly descended. Ah! Ferdinand looked up at the sky and let out a shrill cry. The black fog dissipated in the holy light at a speed visible to the naked eye. Many of them disappeared in the holy light before they could even turn into ghostly faces. Ferdinand's face became even paler, and he even felt like he was going to become transparent. The red color outside his eyes gradually faded, and his eyes returned to black. He looked at Connie, and said weakly, Connie, I didn't want to kill you. I never. Please. Please save me, but you killed everyone I cherished, including you. Connie choked with sobs with red eyes. If there's a next life, please let her go, Amy continued loudly. Pfft. Ferdinand spat out a mouthful of black blood, and his expression sank into chaos and madness again. Was the old chief's death and that rebellion really planned by Ferdinand? How terrifying! The chief treated him so well, and nurtured him as the next chief. Why did he do this? When the orcs saw this scene, they could basically judge the current situation. Ferdinand, who had nowhere to hide under the holy light, had a definite connection with the devil. Ferdinand suddenly opened his eyes, and stared at Connie with his black eyes. With a crazed expression, he said, "I'm going to kill you. You bastard born of a bitch. You're the ones who killed my mother. You're the ones who made me unable to even see her. All of you should die. Has he ever used any of his benevolence on my mother? I'm going to kill all of you to comfort her soul. She said she died a horrible death. Your mother died in childbirth. She was the one who insisted on protecting you, and entrusted you to my mother, begging her to treat you as her own son. You should know very well how my mother treated you all these years. If she really killed your mother, why would she treat you so well, even better than she treated me?" Connie looked at Ferdinand and hugged the diary tightly. "Grandmother's diary recorded all these things, but you listened to the devil's bewitchment and killed the person closest to you. No. It can't be like this. It can't be like this." Ferdinand grabbed his hair, and roared with a pained expression. He knelt on the ground with a thud, and let out a furious roar. Irina looked at this scene with a cold expression. Suddenly, she raised her brows, and hesitated for a moment. She kept her magic caster's staff, and pointed it at Ferdinand. At the same time, she shouted, "Ferdinand's soul has been completely corroded by the devil, and he has become the devil's most loyal servant. In order to prevent him from continuing to harm the world, the God of Light will cleanse his soul and body completely." As soon as she finished speaking, the holy light on Ferdinand's body exploded. The blinding light made it hard for anyone to see what was inside the holy light. About 3 seconds later, the holy light gradually dissipated. Meanwhile, there was only a tattered shirt left in the center of the gallows platform. It was the one that Ferdinand was wearing earlier. No pop-up window. Chapter 1571. There was dead silence at the scene. The orcs from the Fog tribe looked at that tattered piece of clothing on the gallows, and they couldn't hide the shock and fear on their faces. The holy light had already proven Irina's words. Ferdinand had sold his soul to the devil, and was completely wiped out by the holy light. There was no point in fighting anymore. Perhaps they should thank Irina. If it wasn't for her, they would be facing the rule of a devil. Nobody knew if the Fog tribe would become the next Urba tribe. Now that the Fog tribe was leaderless, where should they go next? The chiefs and representatives of the various tribes had different expressions when they saw this scene. The devil's control of Ferdinand was proven to be real, and it was very likely to have caused the Urba tribe to kill each other hundreds of years ago. Would the same thing happen in the Twilight Forest again? The Fog tribe had lost another 10th-tier powerhouse in this chaos, and had also lost the chief's successor. Their power had dropped significantly, and they were only left with 3 10th-tier orcs who weren't considered very powerful. They might not even be able to gain a foothold in the top 10 tribes. What happened tonight would have a huge impact on the structure of the Twilight Forest. Ding! The black fog has been cleared. The source of the black fog has been completely isolated. Congratulations on completing the mission. You have received the mission reward, a face-changing mask. The system's cheerful voice sounded in Meg's mind. He raised his eyebrows, and walked out of the crowd again. He returned to Amy and the rest with a smile, and said, "Seems like we don't have to retreat anymore." "Brother." Connie looked at that tattered piece of clothing, and bit her lip hard. She was trying her best to control her emotions as tears streamed down her face. That petite figure looked extremely lonely and fragile in the crowd. Everyone looked at her with pity. The survivor of this rebellion was probably the most unfortunate one. The Kingslayer, Gary, is dead. The devil, Ferdinand, who plotted all of this, has been killed. Now, the only one who is qualified to inherit the position of chief of the Fog tribe is this little princess of yours. Irina's gaze landed on Connie, and a gentle light also landed on her. The orcs from the Fog tribe looked at Connie, who was standing in the light, and their eyes gradually lit up. Princess Connie is the chief's favorite princess. Devold walked out of the crowd, and raised his magic caster's staff as he spoke. She's his only child now, so it's only right that she should inherit the position of chief. I agree too. Princess Connie is a kind and brave person. She exposed the devil's lies and scams. She will definitely be able to lead the Fog tribe out of this difficult situation. Another old man walked out, and agreed loudly. All the orcs nodded in agreement. Connie's actions today had changed everyone's impression of the princess, who was as innocent as a little white rabbit. This experience was undoubtedly a trial for her, and she might really be able to lead the Fog tribe back to greatness. Princess Connie, please come to the stage and confer the title of chief. Princess Connie, please come to the stage. The crowd opened up a path to the platform and shouted at Connie. Connie heard those shouts, and her face was filled with fear and confusion. Her gaze subconsciously wandered around the crowd, and finally landed on Meg. Go and protect what your father has been protecting for his entire life, Meg said loudly. Protect. Connie's confused gaze seemed to have caught onto something. She looked at those pairs of trusting eyes, and vaguely saw that solemn man and that loving old lady. She took a deep breath, and walked towards the stage. Connie walked up to the stage, and looked at everyone. She said in a low voice, I am Connie. I might not have the right to stand here, and I might not have the ability to become the chief of the Fog tribe, but what I want to say is, I hope to continue protecting this land and this tribe on behalf of my father. The orcs looked at Connie, and wiped their tears silently. If all these things didn't happen, they would have been a stable and powerful tribe. It's your turn, Ugly Duckling. Meg pulled off the black cloth on Ugly Duckling, and patted its butt gently. A grilled fish by itself. Meow. Ugly Duckling's eyes lit up, and it jumped from Amy's arms to the ground. It weaved through the crowd like a bolt of orange lightning, and dashed towards the stage. Lighting crew in position. Levitation crew in position. Meg said softly. Meow. Just as everyone was immersed in sorrow, a loud and clear cry suddenly sounded. An orange figure suddenly dashed onto the stage, and hovered in front of Connie. That was an orange cat, but it had a pair of translucent white wings on its back, which allowed it to hover in front of Connie. Its body was emitting a holy glow as if it was a god that had descended to earth. Lord Flurkin. It's really Lord Flurkin. All the orcs from the Fog tribe looked at the orange cat that could fly, and were stunned for a moment before ecstasy appeared on their faces. They all knelt on the ground, and many even started to kowtow. This is really Flurkin. The orcs from the other tribes looked at the orange cat hovering in the air, and the orcs from the Fog tribe who were all kneeling on the ground. They hesitated for a moment, and then lowered their heads to show respect. Every tribe had a beast god that they worshipped, but the beast gods had only manifested a few times in history. No one would have thought that Flurkin would actually manifest after the Fog tribe went through such a calamity. Ugly, Connie looked at the orange cat floating in front of her, and blurted out after being stunned for a moment. Meow. However, before she had a chance to say anything, Ugly Duckling had already covered her mouth with one paw. At the same time, it pressed its other paw onto her head, and the light seemed to have become even brighter, as if it were carrying out some kind of inheritance. Everyone's eyes gradually widened when they saw this mysterious scene. They might be witnessing an important scene. About 10 seconds later, Ugly Duckling retracted its fat paw from Connie's head, and a golden crown appeared on Connie's head. Meow. Ugly Duckling called out again, and then disappeared into thin air. All the light dissipated, and only the golden crown on Connie's head was left shining brightly. Lord Flurkin has chosen Princess Connie. Lord Flurkin has also acknowledged Princess Connie to lead the Falk tribe. Chief Connie! Chief Connie! All the orcs stood up and started cheering as they looked at Connie. Chapter 1572. Ugly duckling, well done. I'll add another prawn for you tonight. Meg reached out to stroke the head of Ugly Duckling that Irina teleported back. In order to prevent it from being exposed on the spot, he put the black cloth bag over it again. With Flurkin's declaration, Connie's ascension to the throne was justified, and she was worshipped crazily by all the orcs in the Falk tribe. She was much more popular than Ferdinand previously. Boss, your plan is amazing. Yabamia looked at Meg with admiration. Elizabeth also took a few more glances at Meg. After Meg's godlike maneuver, he had perfectly solved most of the problems that Connie might face after she ascended to the throne. No one dared to go against the beast god's will, and no one dared to question whether a woman could become the chief. The chiefs and orc representatives of the various tribes hesitated for a while before returning to their seats one after another. This conferring ceremony that was acknowledged by the beast god might be able to pull the Falk tribe back from the brink of falling off the pedestal. No one knew what Flurkin had bestowed upon this young female chief of the Falk tribe. The Falk tribe might become even stronger in the future. From today onwards, I, the hairless monk, Rex, will stay in the Falk tribe as a guardian until Connie grows into a powerful chief. Rex appeared behind Connie, and gave Oster a warning glance. I hope the Falk tribe can walk out as soon as possible. Oster snorted coldly, and left with the August tribe's people with a dark expression. A few chiefs and representatives who were loyal to the August tribe also stood up and left quickly. Master. Connie turned to look at Rex, and couldn't stop her tears anymore. You don't have to worry about anything with me around. Rex looked at Connie, and squeezed out a smile on his old-fashioned face. In that case, the hairless monk has joined the Falk tribe. He's a man who's on par with Oster. After losing Isaiah and Gary, but gaining the hairless monk, the Falk tribe's power didn't decrease much. It's still the second most powerful tribe in the Twilight Forest. The chiefs and representatives of the various tribes looked at this scene thoughtfully with different expressions. The hairless monk's crime of slaughtering the Urba tribe was cleared today. The existence of the devil was like a sword hanging over everyone's head. Was it a coincidence that hundreds of years had passed? No one knew where he would appear next. Basil was imprisoned, and until it was certain that he had regained his sanity, his movements would be restricted. Daryl and Kurt were still able to discern the changes in the situation and chose to pledge their loyalty to Connie. Connie's coronation ceremony was not too grand. She cancelled all the subsequent celebrations that Gary had arranged. After thanking the guests and her clansmen, she announced the end of the ceremony. After everything that had happened tonight, everyone needed to rest, including her. The guests from various tribes began to leave. Irina also took her leave. No one would have thought that neither Gary nor Ferdinand would become the chief. In the end, it was Connie who became the new chief of the Falk tribe. This incident was bound to have a huge impact on the Twilight Forest, and even the Norland continent. Ask Mr. Meg and his team from the main kitchen to come to the palace to see me, Connie instructed a close official before entering the palace. Let's go. We can meet the new chief at another place. Meg held Amy's little hand, and walked against the crowd toward the palace. Irina changed her outfit, and landed beside everyone. She nodded slightly at Meg. Meg understood her gesture. He raised his eyebrows, and smilingly said, "The lighting is perfect. Isn't it a waste to let a 10th tier light elemental magic caster do something like this?" Irina looked at Meg with a hint of a smile. This beam of light has an effect that even 10th tier magic casters can't achieve. Only the most professional light elemental magic caster can do it, Meg said matter-of-factly. That sounds like a good idea. Irina nodded. Meg heaved a sigh of relief. It was indeed very difficult to find such a professional lighting engineer. And Barbara's spatial magic is also very impressive. She can make ugly duckling float in the air, Yebamia praised. Ahem. Barbara looked smug. She coughed softly, and said, I only waved my hand casually. That's the standard that even a 4th tier spatial magic caster can do. You did just wave your hand casually. Meg nodded. Barbara's expression froze. She raised her eyebrows, and snorted angrily. With the new chief's orders, Meg and the rest were brought into the palace successfully. Compared to last night when they had to sneak in, today they walked in through the main entrance and received a good reception along the way. The chief is inside. She invites all of you in. The captain of the guards opened the door to a hall for Meg and the rest with a smile. Meg and the rest walked in, and the door closed slowly behind them. Boss, and everyone. Connie, whose eyes were red, turned around to look at Meg and the rest. Although tears were welling up in her eyes again, she bit her lip to hold them back. It's all right. Everything will pass. Meg walked forward and patted her shoulder gently to console her. Yes, Connie. You've already become the new chief of the Falk tribe. If your father and grandmother see you continue to protect the tribe and lead the Falk tribe to become stronger, they will be very happy, Yebamia consoled gently as she went forward to hold Connie's hand. I'm afraid I can't do it well. Connie looked worried and unconfident. Since you have the courage to stand up, you should believe that you can do it. Meg shook his head with a smile. The first female chief of the Falk tribe, and the most powerful female chief of the Twilight Forest in the future. Barbara looked at Connie, and touched her chin thoughtfully. The first queen of the Moon Nation. Do you want to give it a try? Don't you still have an elder brother? Camilla reminded her. Barbara thought for a while, and said, he. Then he will be my stumbling block. Connie's expression only relaxed after everyone's gentle persuasion. However, Ferdinand was a huge blow to her, and she probably wouldn't be able to forget it for a long time. You should rest for a while. Irina walked forward, and tapped Connie's glabella gently with her finger. A green light lit up, and Connie collapsed in Irina's arms. She probably hasn't closed her eyes since last night, Irina explained to everyone as she put her down gently on a bench at the side. Is this big sister Connie's grandmother's diary? Amy asked as she pointed at the thick sheepskin book at the side. Book reading website. Chapter 1573. Chief, Ferdinand is dead, and Connie is now the chief of the Falk tribe. There's also the hairless monk. Our plans are all messed up. What should we do now? An orc on the back of the flaming bird worriedly said to Oster, who had a dark expression. Lex is just a brainless brute, there's nothing to be afraid of. We don't have to worry too much about that yellow-haired girl either. However, the sudden appearance of the Flurkin beast god will allow her to gain some prestige after the news spreads, which will affect our plan to conquer the other tribes. Oster frowned, and pondered for a while before saying, let's go according to the original plan. Tell the public that this little girl is reckless, and can't take on big responsibilities. She's not fit to shoulder the position of the chief of the Falk tribe. After that, go and interact more with Daryl and Kurt, and promise them some benefits so that they can start another rebellion. Yes, the golden-armored orc replied. Gary's death, and Connie's succession was an earth-shattering event for the Falk tribe. However, because of Flurkin's recognition, the shock was minimized. Everyone believed that Lord Flurkin had made the wisest and greatest choice for the Falk tribe. As Chief Isaiah's daughter, Connie would become the new chief of the Fog tribe, and continue to protect Tadari. Of course, there were voices of opposition. However, in front of the Hairless Monk's unparalleled power, most people chose to keep quiet. Because of Gary's framing and suppression, the orcs who were locked up in various prisons were released, and the vicious accomplices were locked up. Many things were happening in the night. Everyone knew that when the sun rose tomorrow, Connie's era would officially begin. So, the mission given to me by the organization is completed just like that. Hannah walked back to her little courtyard slowly. She was still in disbelief. She hadn't had time to use her wine tonight, and she hadn't had time to do her other preparations before everything was settled. But, what is the mission given to him by the organization this time? Save Ferdinand. Then Ferdinand is dead. Is the mission considered completed? Hannah stopped in her tracks, and was a little conflicted. Then, can I leave this place this time? Grandpa said that I can leave as long as I complete the mission given by the organization. I've waited for so many years. Could it be a lie? In the dilapidated room, Lex stood quietly. Among the broken pieces of porcelain on the floor, there were a few pieces that looked familiar. His old friend had already passed away, and he could only find something to reminisce about from these things. I thought that as long as I was far away, you would gradually forget what happened that night. Lex sighed softly and fell into a long silence. Don't worry. I'll keep an eye on Connie for you. This time, I won't leave. A low voice rang out in the room. It sounded like he was talking to himself, but it also sounded like some kind of promise. The sound of footsteps came closer, and two figures appeared at the door of the room. Lex slowly turned around and looked at Irina and the masked Meg, who were standing at the door. She did not seem too surprised by their arrival. Regarding the devil and the evil god, we would like to know something from you, Meg said in a different tone, at the same time taking off the black and white mask on his face. Under the mask was a resolute face. There was a long and narrow scar at the corner of his eyebrows. He had thick eyebrows and big eyes, and he looked very righteous. Alex, right? Lex looked at Meg, and there was finally a hint of surprise on her face. That's me. Meg nodded slightly. Obviously, you already know some things, and can see where Ferdinand's problem lies. Yes. A few months ago, Borg from the elf tribe was the first to experience this condition. It was even more serious than Ferdinand's. We discovered that the holy light had a restraining effect on the black fog. Then, it was Alfred from the Abyss Demon tribe. The black fog appeared on a small island in the boundless sea realm. All the animals there went crazy because of the black fog. We saw the remnants of the animals devouring each other, and knew the possible effects the black fog could have on normal creatures. Meg said calmly, then, it was Ferdinand and Gary. Their conditions were considered very mild. In just a few months, there were already 3 black fog incidents. Lex could not help but raise her voice when she heard that. Yes. Meg nodded. We are worried that this is a bad signal. If the black fog appears all over the continent, we won't be able to grasp the situation and eliminate it at all times. Once the black fog reaches an uncontrollable scale, it could be destructive to the Norland continent. A black fog that engulfs a tribe can destroy a tribe. If the black fog engulfs the entire Norland continent, then the entire continent will be plunged into a frenzy of slaughter. It is far more terrifying than a racial war, Lex said in a low voice, and her expression became extremely grave. Have you seen the existence in the black fog? Irina asked Lex. Lex's gaze flickered, and a hint of hesitation appeared in her eyes. If we want to stop all of this from happening, then we need to know more about it. Meg looked at Lex and said, when I was in the boundless sea realm, I was once attracted into a stone statue. There, I saw a huge stone hall, a throne made of bones, and a man whose face I couldn't see clearly. Back then, when we arrived at the Urba tribe, we happened to see them carrying out a terrifying ritual. Lex recounted what they had encountered back then. That was an unforgettable night. Even though he had never mentioned it to anyone else for hundreds of years, he could still recount the scene that he had seen back then. They started killing each other crazily. They tore each other's bodies apart, and dug out the children's hearts to eat. And in the black fog, we saw an indescribably terrifying existence. It was as majestic as a mountain. Even a giant dragon was like a mosquito in front of it. Lex's voice was trembling slightly, and there was uncontrollable fear in her eyes. We crouched on the top of the mountain, and didn't dare to move. It was only until the next day when the black fog gradually dispersed, and that indescribable existence disappeared without a trace that we went down from the mountain. Lex looked at Meg, and paused for a while. Then, she took out a black stone box from a spatial pocket, and passed it to Meg. This is. Meg reached out to take the palm-sized stone box, but it was surprisingly heavy, and he almost dropped it. This is what I found on their altar. I have never opened it for so many years, Lex said. Chapter 1574. Aren't you going to open it and take a look? Irina asked as she walked beside Meg and looked at the black stone box in his hand. Before we can confirm if the thing inside will go out of control, it's better to find a safer and more suitable place to open it. Meg shook his head with a smile. He turned the corner and reached out to remove the mask that was stuck tightly to his face. The effect of the face-changing mask that the system rewarded was indeed very good. You don't like this face anymore? Irina asked as she looked at the mask in Meg's hand. Meg kept the mask, and smiled at her as he said, I like this face and my current identity even more. Irina looked into Meg's eyes, and thought for a while before smiling. It's pretty good. Have you made the arrangements on Ferdinand's side? Meg asked as he continued to walk forward. I sealed him up and he's in a deep slumber. He can be brought up for interrogation anytime. Irina nodded slightly, and asked, do we need to inform Connie about this? Let's not tell her first. This fellow is rotten to the core. Letting Connie know will only add to her troubles. Meg shook his head. The two of them left the palace as they discussed. This was the first time Meg took off his mask to show Alex's appearance in order to gain Rex's trust. Rex's existence was a little special. Although he was the deputy warden of Chaos City's Bowtie prison now, he couldn't simply belong to Chaos City. As for the Fog tribe, he only chose to stay because of Connie's grandmother and Connie. Their attitudes toward the Black Fog and the Devils were the same, so Meg wanted to use his sincerity to get him to stand on their side. At least they would be on the same side when it came to dealing with the Devils. Meg couldn't predict what kind of war this would be, so he needed more powerful allies. In a cave outside the city, Irina waved her hand to undo the seal at the entrance, and the two of them entered successfully. Ferdinand, who was covered with a thick sackcloth, was curled up in a corner. His face was as pale as a sheet, and he was in a deep slumber. Between his eyebrows, there was a ball of black mist that had yet to disperse. Given his condition, will he be able to hold on for much longer? Meg asked after checking on his condition. That's what it looks like on the surface, but his vitality is much stronger than it looks, Irina said without a hint of worry. Hearing that, Meg ignored Ferdinand and took out the stone box instead. The heavy stone box seemed to contain some kind of extremely dense metal. The palm-sized box actually weighed dozens of kilograms. Irina waved her hand and set up several restrictions in the cave. She also looked at the stone box in Meg's hand. Let's see what the Urba tribe worshipped back then. Meg placed the stone box on a rock in the middle of the cave. Taking a deep breath, he opened the lid of the stone box. A cold aura rushed out of the stone box, causing the temperature in the cave to drop significantly. However, Meg and Irina's gazes were already attracted by the statue in the stone box. It was a statue of a monster that made one feel disgusted and fearful at first glance. It had the head of an octopus, the body of a human, and the wings of a bat. Its entire body was pitch black, but its eyes were blood red, and there was a faint glow in them. "See Cthulhu." Meg raised his eyebrows slightly. Looking at the statue, he felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. What a disgusting monster. Isn't this the indescribable thing that Lex described earlier? Irina said with a frown as she resisted the urge to use holy light to destroy the stone statue. It should be. Meg nodded. Back then, the Urba tribe worshipped and believed in this evil god. In the end, it led to the terrifying calamity of the entire tribe's destruction. Meg could already feel the temperature in the cave dropping. He frowned as he looked at the stone statue. It was indeed strange. It was even more majestic than the stone statue on the island in the boundless sea realm. He's awake. Irina suddenly turned to look at Ferdinand, who was lying in the corner of the cave. Ferdinand had already sat up silently. The ball of black aura between his brows started to spin crazily like a vortex, engulfing the wisps of black fog. His originally pure black eyes had already turned blood red. He grinned, revealing a mouthful of white teeth, and smiled eerily at Meg and Irina. He's absorbing the power of this stone statue. Meg glanced at the stone statue's eyes that were gradually brightening. It seemed that some kind of connection had been built between Ferdinand and it. Holy light. Irina raised her magic caster's staff. Holy light lit up the cave like a sharp blade, cutting off the connection between Ferdinand and the stone statue. The vortex between Ferdinand's brows collapsed. His body swayed, and he fell to the ground once again, unconscious. Meanwhile, Meg closed the lid of the stone box, isolating the cold aura from leaking out. Meg kept the stone box with a frown, and said, "It's been a few hundred years, and they're still haunting us. These things are indeed more troublesome than I thought." Irina put down her magic caster's staff, and worriedly said, "If these fellows want to control this world, and there are still some idiots from the various races who only want to fight for territory, once the racial war starts again, the black fog will erupt along with it. I'm afraid we won't have the ability to control the entire situation. We have to let them know about these things during the peace talks between the various races this time." The incident at the Fok tribe quickly spread to all the important places on the continent in various ways, and caused quite a stir. Devil. I didn't expect this to be the outcome. In the city lord's castle, Roland passed the confidential, urgent letter to Michael with an unconcealable shock on his face. This. Michael also couldn't calm down for a long time after reading the letter. Michael was silent for a long time before putting down the confidential letter in his hand. He looked at Roland and said, "It seems like we have to change our strategy. If what Meg said is true, then no one can escape. We have to gather the strength of the various races and prepare to welcome the terrifying existence that might come. I'm afraid it won't be easy to convince those fellows." Roland frowned. "But we still have to do it." A horse-drawn carriage stopped outside Amy's. Vivian lifted the curtains, and looked at the notice hanging on the door with her hand under her chin. She sadly mumbled, "When will Mr. Mac come back? I've been waiting for the grilled fish for so long. Didn't Mr. Meg get invited to cook for the Fok tribe's conferring ceremony?" "The ceremony ended yesterday, so they will definitely be back today," Luna, who was sitting beside her, said with a smile. "Never mind the grilled fish, but why can't we eat hot pot? Didn't they still have hot pot to eat when they went out the last time?" Vivian grumbled. She hadn't eaten anything good for 3 days. Maybe they all left together this time. Luna shrugged, and guessed. "I'm warning you again. This is the Marquis family's shop. If you dare to come here again, I will arrest you and throw you into Bowtie prison for the rest of your life. A tall orc pushed Reyna out, and looked at Reyna, who was lying on the ground, with his head held high. Chapter 1575. Reyna looked at her palm that had been cut open by the pebble, and got up. She took out a few certificates from her bag, and said to the orc sternly, "This is the real estate certificate that the city lord's castle has stamped and verified. I am the owner of this shop now. I am now officially warning you that if you continue to occupy my shop and hurt me, I will request the city lord's castle to intervene. Why, you said it's yours, so it's yours. I still think your certificate is fake." The orc's expression changed slightly when he saw the real estate certificate in Reyna's hand. However, he quickly raised his voice, and said, "This is Bennett's shop, which is also the property of the Marquis family. Our master said that if anyone dares to cause trouble, we will go to the city lord's castle together and see how the Marquis family's property became someone else's." After saying that, the orc turned around and went into the shop, and slammed the door shut. These fellows. Reyna clenched her fist in frustration. Her fingers touched the wound on her palm, and she couldn't help but frown in pain. "Reyna, are you all right?" Phyllis, who had just returned to the dormitory, quickly went up to Reyna, and patted the sand off her clothes. She looked at the wound on her palm, and couldn't help but be worried and angry. "Did those fellows hit you?" "Phyllis, I'm fine. I wanted to go into the shop, but they didn't let me in. They pushed me. It's just a small wound." Reyna shook her head with a smile as she looked at Phyllis, who was blowing the sand off her hand with a heartache, and then carefully wrapping her palm with a scarf. Phyllis said angrily, "Those fellows are scoundrels. This shop is already yours, but they said it was theirs and refused to leave. When boss and the rest come back, they will definitely help you. It's all right. The real estate certificate is with me. They won't be able to refuse to leave." Reyna shook her head, but her expression was still a little worried. "It's just that the renovation of the shop is about to be completed, and we should have started hiring employees in the next 2 days. We've spent the past 2 days here, so we didn't have time to test the taste and go to the market. These things will have to be postponed. It's okay. I think the hot pot you made yesterday was already very delicious. If you can make it that good with substitute ingredients, your business will definitely be very, very good," Phyllis encouraged with a smile. "Not yet." Shaking her head, Reyna said with a solemn expression, "I feel that there's a problem with yesterday's tripe. We need to find a more suitable supplier. There are also many areas that need to be improved on the hot pot base. There are still many problems. Then I'll accompany you to the market. I don't have anything to do in the afternoon anyway, and I'm worried that those guys will come after you again. At least I can protect you," Phyllis said with a smile as she wrapped her arm around Reyna's. "Yes, thank you, Phyllis." Reyna also smiled, and the two left hand in hand. "Young master, we've chased them away, but..." The orc who had pushed Reyna earlier came to the second floor and looked at the young man standing at the window with a hesitant expression. "You just didn't expect the property deed to be in that woman's hands, right?" Jonah frowned as he looked at the two young ladies who were walking away slowly. There was a hint of anger in his voice. The orc took a few steps forward, and lowered his voice as he said, "You see, do you need us to take her property deed, snatch it?" Jonah laughed. He turned to look at that orc with a dark expression, and said, "You idiot. Don't you know how Bennett got in? The entire Chaos City is in a state of panic now, and an idiot like you still has the cheek to say something like that. Furthermore, Bennett has only been in there for a few days, and this shop is already under this woman's control. Do you really think she has nothing to do with the City Lord's castle and the Grey Temple? I've done my research. This woman was born in the slums. She doesn't have a father, and grew up with her mother. She used to be an accountant in a small shop, and only recently became a service staff member at Mamie's. I don't think she has anyone backing her up, the orc said hesitantly. Idiot. Do you think the city lord's castle picked a random person to help the poor? Jonah was so angry that his hands were shaking. He waved his sleeves and said, "Send out this warning. Without my father's and my orders, don't lay a finger on this woman or Mamie's. Anyone who has anything to do with this restaurant will not have a good ending. But Master said we have to take down this shop. If this woman still comes, I will tell father about it." Bennett's downfall is a good thing for the Marquis family, but it's also a bad thing. Be more careful with your words and actions in the future. No one in the underworld will let us off on account of Bennett in the future, Jonah warned with a dark expression. Yes, that orc hurriedly replied. Jonah turned to walk downstairs and said, "Prepare the carriage. I'm going to the tea house." The horse-drawn carriage quickly stopped in front of that tea house called Ben. This was the most luxurious tea house in Chaos City. It had been closed for several days because of Bennett's arrest. However, the city lord's castle and the Grey Temple's seal on the door had been removed. There were even a few tall demons and orcs standing guard at the door. "Young master." All the guards bowed respectfully when they saw Jonah alight from the horse-drawn carriage. "Is father inside?" Jonah asked with a frown as he glanced at the seal that was thrown aside. "Yes. Master is inside," a demon answered, and opened the door for him. In the luxurious tea house, Bowen was leaning against the fireplace with a pot of tea in front of him. The steam was rising slowly, and a mink blanket was covering his legs. He smiled at Jonah, who came in, and said, "Have a seat." Jonah sat down opposite Bowen and directly asked, "Father, isn't it a little inappropriate to remove the seal without the Grey Temple's permission?" Bowen picked up the teapot and slowly filled a teacup. Then, he placed the teacup in front of Jonah and smilingly said, "Try this cat ear tip from Vic Mountain." "Father." Jonah didn't reach for the teacup, and worriedly said, "Father, Jonah, do you think Bennett's arrest is a good thing or a bad thing for us?" Bowen asked Jonah. Jonah thought about it seriously and said, "Bennett has done many illegal things. This day would come sooner or later, and he might even implicate the family. Now that he's arrested, it's like removing a fireball that could explode at any time for the Marquis family. It's not a bad thing. Whatever Banner owns, it used to belong to the family. However, that's his, not ours. Now that he's been arrested, he left behind such a huge mess. We don't want those things that don't taste good, but if we lose some of them, it will be a huge loss to us and the family." Bowen picked up the teacup and took a sip. He revealed a strange smile and said, "We can give up those dirty properties, but we can't lose a single thing that we should have. You don't have to worry about the city lord's castle and the Grey Temple. The Marquis family has been in Chaos City for so many years. If we can't even hold on to our own properties, how can we be considered the four major families? But, just watch. These properties won't run away." Bowen smiled and gestured for Jonah to drink his tea. Chapter 1576. City Lord, according to Chaos City's laws, Bennett has committed a grave crime, and should be punished severely. However, the properties under him do not belong to him. The tea houses, shops, and restaurants are all the Marquis family's properties. They shouldn't be confiscated. Yes, City Lord. We don't have any evidence to prove that these properties are involved in illegal operations. Isn't it too hasty to punish them like this? It's unfair to the Marquis family. City Lord, Michael frowned as he listened to the official's advice. With a sullen expression, he said, "Bennett's case is still under investigation. It's not up to you to decide if those properties are really clean. An elderly official stood up and looked at Michael with an intense gaze as he said, "City Lord, our Chaos City is a city ruled by law, and justice is the foundation of our city. If we can't even guarantee that, I'm afraid we'll disappoint our residents. I've never doubted the rule of law, and will never cross this bottom line," Michael said solemnly as he looked at that official. Michael looked at that official with a serious expression before sweeping his gaze across all the other officials present. His voice also became sterner as he said, "However, if anyone wants to confuse right and wrong, I will not tolerate it. Bennett's incident will be the beginning of Chaos City's reformation of the underground world. It's best not to have any wishful thinking." A few officials avoided Michael's gaze in a panic. "You should have done this long ago." That elderly official who stood up earlier nodded with relief. Meeting adjourned. Michael stood up and walked out of the door. "City Lord, the Marquis family has torn off the tea house's seal, and sent people to move in," Dykes said as he followed beside Michael. "Who gave them the approval?" Michael asked with a frown. "The approval from the Department of Property Rights. According to the rules, they have the authority to decide on the ownership of properties that have yet to be determined. The Marquis family submitted the application, and the process is in accordance with the rules," Dykes replied. "Ha! They even dare to issue an approval at a time like this. The four major families are indeed a little greedy." Michael sneered with a dark expression. "Should we inform the Department of Property Rights about this?" "No need. I want to see how far they can go." Michael shook his head and gravely said, "It's time to clean up the City Lord's castle. I'm afraid they've all forgotten who they're supposed to serve. If the interests of the four major families are above the law, then Chaos City will have no place to stand." "Yes." Dykes' expression turned serious. After a moment of silence, he said, "Apart from that, the shop that the Grey Temple gave to Miss Raina from Amy's has also been taken over by the Marquis family." "There's such a thing." Michael stopped and frowned. "Who instigated it this time?" "The Department of Property Rights seems to have written them a note. It seems that after old Marquis died, there is indeed no successor." Michael smiled as he continued walking forward. "Should we send someone to mediate over there?" Michael shook his head and said, "Don't worry about them. Someone will teach them a lesson, and it'll be easier than us. However, the Department of Property Rights is most likely rotten to the core. Go to the Grey Temple for me later." "Yes." Dykes nodded. He wondered if the Grey Temple would intervene in this matter. They were the ones who gave the shop away, so it didn't seem to be a problem for them to intervene. "What interesting things have happened in the city recently?" Ian asked with a smile as he sat next to the fish pond with a fishing rod in his hand and a buoy in his eyes. "There are quite a lot of interesting things. That Bennett from the Marquis family has failed, and all the dirty things he did were exposed. He probably won't be able to get out of jail this time." Hill, who was sitting next to him, was throwing a bunch of biscuits into the fish pond. There was already a big school of fish in front of them. "That little fellow has been on the wrong path since he was young. His father is also a jerk. If I didn't help him, he would have ended up like this. It's really sad." Ian sighed. "He deserves it. What's there to pity?" Hill pursed his lips. "For this matter to become like this, the City Lord's castle is most likely going to start dealing with this problem. You're the head of the family now. You have to keep an eye on your subordinates. You can't be careless. I'll break anyone who dares to do that." Hill sternly said, "There are so many ways to earn money. If you insist on going down the wrong path, then don't blame me for being merciless." "Ha, you have my style, lass." Ian looked at Hill with satisfaction and smilingly said, "If it were your father or those uncles of yours, they wouldn't have said or done such things. This concerns the survival of the family. I have a balance in my heart. Those methods are not long-term solutions, and they can't let the family prosper, Hill said seriously. All right. Go and do your work. You've already fed the fish. What else am I going to fish for? Ian said with disdain. Humph. Then you can fish by yourself. Hill tossed the remaining biscuits in his hand into the fish pond, and left with a smile. This lass. Ian looked at Hill's receding figure with resignation. Then, he casually tossed his hook into the school of fish, and chuckled to himself as he murmured to himself, that old man Jeffrey isn't as carefree as I am. In a luxurious private room, smoke was swirling around. Cyril was lying in the arms of a blonde beauty, intoxicated by the magic potion. Young Master Cyril, what have you been busy with recently? Have you found a way to make a fortune? A young master in a golden robe asked with a smile as he lay across from him. Sigh, don't talk about it. I've been annoyed by a lass recently. Cyril spat on the ground with a dark expression. He had heard that Suede Apparel's business was booming, and it had become the most popular and reputable women's clothing store in Chaos City. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was raking in money every day. Meanwhile, the doubtful voices in the family had also started to side with Gloria because she had turned Suede's losses into profits, and even created another industry. His blacksmith shop had not been doing well recently, and he was starting to feel tired from the increase in production. With his ability, he could not do better in the short term. Then, let me tell you about a good business deal. Have you heard about the Marquis family's Bennett being arrested recently? Who doesn't know about this? Cyril pursed his lips. He did not care much about the business deal that this scoundrel friend of his was talking about. Indeed, everyone knows about this, but not many people know that after Bennett was arrested, 10 odd gambling dens and brothels in the city were closed down. Those gamblers and customers have nowhere to go, so they have been very restless recently. That person chuckled and said, if we open a few gambling dens and brothels at this time, and get some of that medicine to sell to make up for the shortfall, it won't be easy to earn money. There's such a thing. Are you serious? Cyril sat up immediately with glowing eyes. Wonderful book house. Chapter 1577. On the second day after Connie succeeded the throne, she represented the Falk tribe and Irina to make a joint announcement. They announced that the Falk tribe and the Night Elves would form an alliance to work together to maintain world peace. This joint announcement quickly spread to all parts of the Norland continent, and caused quite a stir. No one could understand how this little princess, who used to be unknown, could gain the favor of the hairless monk Nyrina at the same time, and become one of the few people standing at the top of the Norland continent. The one with the biggest reaction was naturally the Wind Forest. They immediately issued a warning to the Falk tribe to be mindful of their relationship with the Night Elves. Otherwise, they would be seen as the elves' enemy. Immediately after that, the August tribe also issued an announcement to express their opposition to the Falk tribe forming an alliance with the Night Elves. They also instigated the other Orc tribes to isolate and ostracize the Falk tribe. A few of the August tribe's younger brothers followed in their elder brother's footsteps, and issued similar announcements one after another. They described the Falk tribe as a weak woman after Connie succeeded the throne. A war soon engulfed the Twilight Forest. But what was unexpected was that the various tribes didn't lean towards the August tribe. On the contrary, many of the tribes that wavered because of Isaiah's murder in the rebellion stood behind the Falk tribe again. The scale was not inferior to Isaiah's era. A banquet was in progress in the long dining room of the palace. There was a plate of steak in front of everyone, and red wine was poured into the wine glasses. The wine glowed seductively under the candlelight. Irina raised the wine glass in her hand. She smiled at Connie and said, it seems like the warmongers and peacemakers in the Twilight Forest are almost evenly matched. Oster's scheme was aborted because of your ascension. He doesn't have the ability to unite the entire orc tribe in a short period of time. But, what if he still wants to start a war? Connie asked worriedly as she held the fruit juice in her hand. Although the August tribe and the other tribes under his rule are quite powerful, it's impossible for him to conquer the continent without the support of half of the orc tribes. Even the gnomes are enough to make him suffer. Meg pursed his lips. He wasn't too worried about this anymore. Although the process was completely out of his expectations and plans, the current situation in the Twilight Forest had already reached his initial expectations. Connie had become the new chief of the Fog tribe, and with Rex's protection, there was no need to worry about the political instability. The support of the various tribes and the battle teams determined that the Twilight Forest could not be united. Even if Oster did not give up, he still needed to have the strength to do so. As long as there weren't any major changes, the Beast Men wouldn't be able to do much during the peace talks. But why do I have to continue drinking fruit juice now that I'm the chief? Connie swirled the fruit juice in her hand as she looked at Meg in confusion. Underage chieftains are not allowed to drink alcohol. This is the rule. Meg looked at her seriously. Connie thought about it seriously, and nodded. All right. This fruit juice is quite delicious. Big Sister Connie, is it fun to be the chief? Amy asked Connie curiously. Everyone was also looking at Connie, ready to listen to her feelings and mental journey after being the chief for 2 days. Connie thought about it seriously, and shrugged. I think it's more fun to deliver goods. I just have to deliver the goods. It's simple and relaxing, and I don't have to think too much about it. But it's different when I'm the chief. They report to me a lot of things every day. Which family's sheep gave birth to how many cubs, which tribe's trap was destroyed by the people from the neighboring tribe. Why do I have to know all these things? It's a little weird. Everyone looked at her sympathetically. It sounded like being the chief was not a very interesting thing. Meg looked at Connie and thought about it seriously for a while. He didn't know if the position that those fellows were racking their brains to climb to was really that attractive. At least to him, power was indeed not attractive. The joy that it could bring was probably not as good as a compliment from the customers or Amy's coquettishness. Boss, are you going back early tomorrow morning? Connie asked Meg. Yes. We've already stood the customers up for 3 days. If we don't go back now, I'm afraid they'll tear down the shop. Meg nodded. They were supposed to leave today, but Connie asked them to stay for another day. Firstly, it was to help her hold the fort, and secondly, it was a proper farewell. Connie was now the chief of the Fog tribe. After this disaster, the Fog tribe had many things to do. There was also the August tribe eyeing them covetously. Connie naturally couldn't go back and continue being a deliveryman without a sense of direction. I'm sorry. Because of the heavy responsibility of reviving the tribe, I really can't go back and continue being a deliveryman. I know this is a very big loss to the restaurant, and the delivery business might even be paralyzed because of this. I feel extremely pained and remorseful about this. It's all right. Our restaurant's only delivery customer is in your tribe now. I can still bear this little loss. Meg rolled his eyes. Once Connie left, their delivery business would indeed come to a premature end. But it was all right. He didn't rely on delivery for a living anyway. It was just as well to bury it on the spot. Boo-hoo. I can't bear to leave everyone. Connie's eyes suddenly reddened, and tears started to fall like a wronged child. It's all right, Connie. When you're not busy in the future, you can come and visit us often. When we're on vacation in the future, we can also form a group to visit you. Anyway, I can fly now, so it's very fast for me to go back and forth. Mia, who was sitting next to her, leaned over and hugged her as she wiped her tears with a smile. Yes, yes. Big sister Connie, you have to come and visit us often. Amy nodded her little head. After thinking for a moment, she handed Ugly Duckling in her arms to her. I can let you pet Ugly Duckling. When I become more powerful, I'll be able to construct a super long-distance teleportation portal between your palace and the restaurant. When that time comes, it'll be very convenient for us to visit each other. Barbara crossed her arms in front of her chest. Really? Connie's eyes lit up. She looked at Barbara and said, Barbara, when will you be able to do that? Ahem. Probably. Probably after I reach the 9th tier. Barbara coughed awkwardly. That's great. You only have 2 more tiers to go. You have to work hard, Connie encouraged. Barbara raised her chin again, and proudly said, to be precise, it should be a little more than 1 tier. I already feel like I'm about to break through. The farewell banquet ended in a relaxed and happy atmosphere. After coaxing Amy to sleep, Meg quietly went out and went to Stone Alley alone. Heh, you're here to make wine in the middle of the night again. On the gatehouse, Irina was swinging one leg leisurely. She looked at Meg, who was about to knock on the door, with a hint of a smile on her face. Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 1578. Whoa, Meg jumped back in shock. He raised his head to look at Irina, who had appeared on the tower without him knowing. His expression changed slightly as though he was a little man who was caught by his wife the moment he stepped into the red light district. He forced a smile, and said, to be honest. I'm really here to learn how to brew wine today. Heh, men. Irina took out a wine gourd from nowhere, opened the cap, and took a sip of wine. A beauty drinking wine under the moon. What a beautiful scene. Unfortunately, Meg really didn't know how to appreciate it now. He was indeed here to learn how to brew wine. After all, the mission that the system assigned him to learn how to brew rum hadn't been completed yet. He was going back tomorrow, so he had to hurry to learn it tonight. You really learn wherever you go. Why didn't I realize you were so passionate about learning in the past? Irina put down the wine gourd, and lowered her head to look into Meg's eyes. Learning is something that requires a lifetime of perseverance. Only then can we keep up with the progress of the times, Meg said seriously. Who said so? Zhou Shuren. Who is he? Lu Sun. Who's Lu Sun? A man who said that learning medicine can't save China. Medical soldiers are indeed quite useless. Not everyone can hit people with a chair like me. Meg raised his eyebrows. He felt that there was nothing wrong with what she said, so he honestly said, so, that's why I'm here today. The lady inside is the best brewer in the Fok tribe, and also the person who brews rum the best on the Norland continent. We're going back tomorrow, so I have to learn how to brew rum from her tonight. Alright. I won't stop you if you really want to do something else, as long as you have the guts. Irina jumped down from the door, and landed directly in front of Meg. She looked at him, and said, What do you intend to do with that fellow? Put him in a gunny sack and bring him back first. When you enter the city, just say that he's a local product that you brought back. It shouldn't be a problem, Meg said after thinking for a while. Alright, I'll go out tonight and bring back some specialties. Irina nodded and turned to leave. Bring what? Meg looked at Irina's back and confirmed. Before coming here, I heard that there are a few guys in the Twilight Forest who like to collect elven maids. Irina said and disappeared. Soon, a purplish gold giant beast flew over from outside the Fok tribe, and disappeared after a short while. What's wrong with hobbies? I like maids and elves. Meg sighed. It seemed that the twilight forest wouldn't be too peaceful tonight. Tock tock, Meg knocked on the door. Not long after, the door opened and a fragrant wind drifted over. A figure had already rushed out and was about to throw herself into Meg's arms. "Miss, please be more reserved." Meg took 2 steps back and reached out his hand to stop Hannah from pouncing on him. Although Irina had already left, who knew if she was really gone or not? Hannah rubbed her forehead that was red from being poked by Meg, and felt wronged as she said, "I just want to express my joy for the mission's success. Let's go in and talk." Meg walked into the yard helplessly. This maiden might have been living alone for too long, and her brain was a little wired. "All right." Hannah immediately closed the door and quickly caught up with Meg. She looked at him expectantly, and said, "The mission is a success. Does the organization have any new arrangements for me? Did you give me a new mission or instruction?" "The organization wants you to continue to stay here and wait for further orders," Meg said with a straight face. "Ah." Hannah looked like she had nothing left to live for after hearing that. Her spirit seemed to have been sucked out, and she was just short of lying down and giving up on herself. "I was lying to you." Meg couldn't help but laugh. This maiden was really into her role. Annoying. Hannah clenched her fists, but soon looked at Meg expectantly, and said, "Then what exactly does the organization plan to do with me? I can't wait to sacrifice myself for the organization." "Sacrifice yourself?" Meg frowned. He felt that there was something wrong with this phrase. "Yes, sacrifice myself." Hannah pulled her clothes to the sides, revealing her sexy collarbones. She looked duty-bound. "Wait. Put on your clothes properly. That's not what sacrifice yourself means." Meg quickly took her clothes back and looked around guiltily. Fortunately, Irina had already left. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to clear his name even if he jumped into the Yellow River. "It's not like this. I remember there was a sentence in the declaration when I joined the organization, 'I am willing to sacrifice myself for the organization's cause.'" Hannah looked at Meg with some confusion. "Comrade Old Sim, the organization orders you to immediately start teaching Comrade Meg how to brew rum." Meg couldn't be bothered to explain to her, and said seriously, "Yes. Old Sim will obey the organization's arrangements." Hannah also answered seriously as she led Meg to the brewing room. When she reached the door, she turned back to look at Meg, and carefully asked, "What does the organization plan to do with me after this mission is completed? I mean, is it possible, or should I say, is there any hope, for me to leave this place?" Meg looked at Hannah, whose eyes were glowing, and was slightly stunned. He asked, "You want to leave the Falk tribe?" A glint flashed across Hannah's eyes, but she quickly lowered her head, and softly said, "I will obey the organization's arrangements. If the organization needs me to continue staying here, then I will continue to stay here." Meg looked at Hannah, and suddenly felt a little heartache. Old Sim had guarded this tribe for his entire life. After he died, Hannah took over his codename and continued to guard this place. 10 years was like a day, just to wait for that secret signal that might never sound in her entire life. Such a life was indeed rather boring. But there was a group of people like this who were guarding this place silently. Meg could tell what Hannah was thinking without needing to say anything. After a moment of silence, he said, "The organization's arrangements are not out yet. I will let you know the specific results tomorrow." "All right." A smile appeared on Hannah's face again. She pushed open the brewing room's door, and a pleasant aroma of alcohol wafted over. As the oil lamp on the wall was lit up, the distillation equipment with crisscrossing pipes in the brewing room appeared in front of Meg. Although they weren't glass pipes, as a half-baked designer, he naturally knew what these machines were used for. He just didn't expect a brewery in an orc tribe to already have such advanced equipment, and the brewing technology was even close to the standard of industrialization. These machines were modified by me when I was bored all these years. The firepower of the furnace is a little insufficient, and the folk tribe doesn't have too much metal, so it didn't reach my expectations. Otherwise, I would have been able to make it better. Although the alcohol produced isn't as good as handmade rum in some aspects, it's enough to make ordinary rum. Hannah reached out to knock on a machine beside her. She turned to look at Meg with a radiant smile, and said, "The most important thing is that it saves me a lot of trouble. This way, I don't have to stay here all day to make rum. This is definitely a freaking mechanical genius." Meg looked at Hannah with glowing eyes. Chapter 1579. What do you want to do? Hannah grabbed the hem of her clothes and looked at Mag, who was staring at her with glowing eyes. She bit her lower lip, and hesitantly said, "Although you are my superior, and the organization's rules state that we must obey all orders, but, if your request is too much, I will have to consider it. What are you thinking about?" Mag rolled his eyes as he withdrew his gaze from her. He walked around the brewing room with an oil lamp in his hand, and carefully inspected the distillation machines. It was very difficult to imagine that this was something that a little girl had come up with in this simple and crude wine cellar. Her craftsmanship wasn't as good as that of a professional dwarven blacksmith, but her genius ideas and hands-on skills confirmed Mag's suspicions. This rum master girl was also a genius machinist. "You made all these yourself?" Meg looked back at Hannah and confirmed again. "Yes." Hannah nodded and said with some regret, "This is the first version. I have already drawn the blueprint for the third version, but there are some things that I can't do, so I can only do this." "Where are the blueprints?" Meg looked at her with some interest. "Didn't you want to learn how to brew wine? Why are you so interested in the machines?" Hannah looked at Meg with some confusion, but her eyes were a little excited. This was the first time that someone was interested in the machines she made. She asked, "You really want to see them?" "Yes, I am indeed very interested in these things." Mag nodded. It wasn't a big deal for her to learn how to brew wine. He was more interested in Hannah's design. If this wasn't her limit, then perhaps he had found a very good partner for some of his future plans. "Wait a moment." Hannah quickly walked to the innermost part of the brewing room. She rummaged through a table for a while and pulled out a stack of blueprints. She walked over and handed it to Meg. "Look, this is my third version of the blueprints. I have made the overall structure simpler, but the brewing efficiency has increased. I want to replace some of these iron pipes with transparent crystal pipes. This way, I don't have to worry about the corrosion of the metal causing the wine to change its taste." Hannah pointed at the blueprints and introduced them to Meg. The layout of the drawing was a little messy, but the lines and markings were very standard and easy to understand. As someone who had graduated from the mechanical design major, Mag naturally had no problem understanding these drawings. He had visited a distillery when he was in university, and he had seen a professor dissect the structure of the distillery machine in class. It could be said that the third version of the distillation machine designed by Hannah had reached the professional level of the factory. With the requirements of a top brewer, Meg even felt that the rum brewed by this machine might be better than the factory's. "Isn't it too messy? Can you understand it?" Hannah was talking excitedly. When she saw that Meg was silent, she couldn't help but lower her voice. She looked at him and said with some embarrassment, "No, this is the most perfect design I've ever seen." Meg shook his head with a smile and solemnly put away the drawing. Looking at Hannah, the girl who had become a famous master brewer at such a young age, he asked, "What's your dream?" "Dream?" Hannah was slightly taken aback. After thinking seriously for a while, she said, "I want to turn the things on the drawing into a real machine." In that case, I can let more people taste the rum that I brew. Meg looked at Hannah's sparkling eyes, and smilingly said, "Come with me. I'll bring you back to Chaos City and fulfill your dream." "Really?" Hannah's eyes lit up. She hesitated and said, "Didn't you say that the organization's arrangements are not out yet?" "As long as you're willing, I will arrange all these things. You don't have to worry." Meg shook his head with a smile. Although Hannah was the Grey Temple's informant, the Falk tribe's matter had already been settled, and there was no possibility of using her again in the short term. It was more than a waste to leave such a talent in the mountains. Putting everything else aside, if Hannah could build these machines and open a distillery in Chaos City, as long as she could guarantee the quality of the rum, he, as the dream investor, would be able to earn a lot of money easily. Of course, Mag had even higher expectations for Hannah. A talent like her was not something that could be found anywhere. "I'm willing. Of course I'm willing." Hannah nodded vigorously, and jumped up and down happily. She had wanted to leave the Falk tribe to see the outside world for so many years. Now that the people from the organization were here, she could finally leave. "When are we leaving?" "Are we leaving tonight?" Hannah couldn't wait any longer. Meg chuckled. "What's the hurry? We're not eloping. Keep the drawing properly, and teach me how to brew the rum first. Pack your things after you're done. We'll leave tomorrow morning." "All right." Hannah kept the drawing neatly, and then brought Meg to a machine. She began to teach him how to brew a bottle of premium rum. Rum was brewed using sugar cane and honey as the raw material. There was a piece of land outside the Falk tribe that was very suitable for the growth of sugar cane, and the premium sugar cane provided the best raw material for brewing the rum. The brewing of a bottle of good rum is no easier than that of wine. Meg began to try brewing rum himself after learning how to brew rum systematically under Hannah's guidance. The brewing room was slightly dark under the light of the oil lamp, and steam was coming out from the opening at the top of the machine. Meg stood in front of the machine seriously, and operated it strictly according to the method that Hannah had taught him. Meanwhile, Hannah had already been chased away by Meg to pack her things and prepare for the departure tomorrow. Finally, Meg picked up the small cup of clear rum when it was close to daybreak. The pleasant aroma of the rum wafted over, and he smiled. This was rum that had not been fermented in the oak barrel, but it already had an intoxicating aroma. "Ding! Congratulations, host. You've already grasped the brewing method of rum. You've completed the apprenticeship mission." "Ding! Congratulations, host, for obtaining proficient brewing technique. You've also obtained the brewing method of 3 types of fine wines. The host can choose 3 types of wines from the wine vault to learn." Right at this moment, the system's voice appeared in Meg's mind. "Dukang, Red Star Ergwotu, Nu Hong, Jian Nan Chun, Gujing whiskey, brandy, vodka, tequila." Meg looked at the wine vault list that popped up in his mind. It included almost all the wines, and he was a little dazed for a moment. He didn't know which 3 to choose. "I've already packed my things, but what should I do with these machines and the wines in my wine vault?" Hannah asked Meg worriedly after returning to the brewing room. Bookhouse reading website. Chapter 1580. The next morning, Meg and the rest successfully boarded the Falk tribe's 7th-tier golden armored condor, and embarked on their return journey. Irina had sent him a message last night. She would be returning with the ladies she had saved from the Sea of Fire, and would not be going back with them. When he was with Connie this morning, she told them which tribes in the Twilight Forest were in trouble last night. She even sent all the elven maids in the tribe to the Falk tribe, and asked for their help to hand them over. There probably wouldn't be any orcs who were proud of keeping elven maids in the Twilight Forest for a very long time. After all, those fellows who were showing off last night were all crying at home now. Compared to killing them all, the deterrence effect of this move was indeed much stronger. This is very Irina. Meg raised his eyebrows, and subconsciously clamped his legs together. As for Hannah's brewing machines and cellar wine, Meg could only help her dispose of them on the spot. The machines were dismantled and sold as scrap metal, while the cellar rum was packaged and sold to the nobles in the city. This made Hannah's heart ache, but she was already sure that she wouldn't be coming back, so she didn't object to this method. Father brought back another beautiful big sister after this trip, Amy mumbled softly as she looked at Hannah, who was sitting at the side. Meg happened to hear that, and his lips twitched. He smiled and explained, "Big sister Hannah is a very impressive brewer. She might be working with all of you in the restaurant for some time. I am Hannah. I hope everyone can take care of me." Hannah stood up and greeted everyone formally shyly. "Hello, Hannah. I am Mia." Everyone introduced themselves and got to know each other. These big sisters are all so beautiful, and their personalities are so good. This is great. Hannah, who was originally worried that she wouldn't be able to fit in, was now very excited. She was also looking forward to the new life that was about to come. "Let's take a rest first. Although the golden armored condor is faster, we can only reach Chaos City in the afternoon for lunch." Meg smiled and said to everyone. He had already laid down comfortably on the recliner and closed his eyes to rest. The trip to the Fog tribe was completed successfully, and the outcome was rather satisfactory. However, the existence of the black fog and the Great Old One made him feel like there was a needle in his back. Since the other party did not intend to remain silent and wallow in depravity, a battle with this world was inevitable. A single force would not be able to deal with such a calamity and opponent. They needed more allies, or even the power of the entire world, to deal with the Great Old Ones. How to make those fellows who were only thinking about conquering the world understand the perilous situation that the Norland continent was in, and how to make them agree to compromise and form an alliance was a very troublesome problem. In comparison, cooking is really a relaxing and enjoyable thing. Meg sighed in his heart. He had thought that he had obtained the God of Cooking script, but now he realized that things were not that simple. "Miss Hannah, what's in your little gourd?" "This is the most precious aged base wine. It's stored here after my grandfather brewed it 50 years ago. There are 15 barrels." When it was close to noon, Chaos City appeared in everyone's sight. After spending an entire morning together, Hannah had already become familiar with all the ladies. With Mia's passionate guidance, Hannah's integration process was very smooth. She was no longer as distant and restrained as she was when they first met in the morning. "Is that Chaos City? What a huge city." Hannah looked at that square city in the distance, and her eyes gradually widened in disbelief. She had gained a lot of knowledge along the way. She saw the vast mountains and rivers outside the Fog tribe, as well as some big and small towns. However, those towns could only be considered as small villages compared to this huge city in front of her. Even if the entire Fog tribe was put in, they would only be able to occupy a small corner. "Yes. That's Chaos City, the place where we will live in the future." Mia smiled. She was not much better than Hannah when she saw this scene for the first time in space. "How many people live here?" Hannah asked curiously. "I heard there are more than 1 million, but it should be more than that," Hannah said after some thought. "More than 1 million." Hannah covered her mouth. The Fog tribe only had 50,000 people, which was already considered a big tribe in the Twilight Forest. However, there were more than 1 million people living in this city. What a terrifying number. The golden armored condor stopped outside the city. Meg got down and instructed everyone before turning to leave. "You all can go back first. I have something to settle first. I will be back soon to make lunch for you all. Let's go, Hannah." Let's go back to the restaurant first. Mia held Hannah's hand, and everyone followed them into the city. In the secret chamber, Roland held Meg's hand, and solemnly said, "We have already received the detailed information. Mr. Meg has completed his mission perfectly, and made a huge contribution to world peace." As for the orcs, they had already lost control after Isaiah was killed by the rebellion. They were unable to stop Oster from unifying the Twilight Forest, and then leading the orcs to become the initiators of war. Meanwhile, Meg's trip this time had shattered Oster's conspiracy and plans, and allowed the Fog tribe to return to the control of the Peacemakers. He allowed the Twilight Forest to become controllable, and undoubtedly pulled the orcs back from the brink of war. "You're too kind, my lord. This is the result of everyone's hard work in the restaurant." Meg smiled humbly. However, his smile quickly disappeared, and he looked at Roland as he lowered his voice, and said, "However, our reward for this trip is not just this. It's just that this reward might not make us happy. This is..." Roland looked at the stone box that Meg took out from his pocket. "This is a sculpture that Rex got from the Urba tribe over 300 years ago when they were slaughtering each other after being controlled by the devil." Meg passed the stone box to Roland and reminded him, "Don't stare at its eyes. It might be dangerous." Roland's expression became serious when he heard that. There were many descriptions of the devil in the secret report, and Meg said that this thing was related to the devil, and it was related to the massacre of the Urba tribe back then. It was probably an extremely ominous object. He received the stone box with both hands, and then placed it on the table. He took a deep breath, and opened the stone box. The palm-sized sculpture gave off an extremely huge and terrifying feeling. Just one look at that pair of blood-red eyes was enough to make one's soul tremble. It was as if some terrifying existence was staring at it. This is... Roland quickly retracted his gaze, and looked at Meg in shock. "The devil, or the Great Old One." Meg's voice was calm, and he felt that his throat was a little dry. Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 1581. This is our restaurant. Hannah stood outside the restaurant and looked at the exquisite and luxurious restaurant in front of her in disbelief. The sun shone on the floor-to-ceiling glass, and the signboard shone brightly. Even the Fog tribe's palace was not as beautiful as this. "Yes. This is Amy's." Mia nodded. She took out the key that Meg had given her, and went forward to open the door. "Is Mr. Mac back?" Harrison's horse-drawn carriage had just stopped, and he jumped down excitedly when he saw everyone opening the door. He went forward, and asked, "Is the restaurant open for business today?" Yabamiya turned to look at Harrison, and shook her head with a smile as she said, "I'm sorry, sir. We just came back, and need to prepare the ingredients and open for business. We can't open for business today. You can come back at night." "I see." Harrison and a few customers who happened to walk over were a little disappointed when they heard that. "Big Sister Mia, we should be having hot pot tonight, right?" Vanessa went forward and asked Mia expectantly. We will." Mia nodded. On the way here, Meg had already confirmed that the restaurant would be open for business tonight. "That's great." Vanessa smiled widely. She had been to all the big restaurants in Chaos City these few days, and had tried some unique food, but she still felt that the taste was lacking. "Amy, your master wants you to go to class this afternoon," Cece said to Amy, who was about to enter, as she poked her head out from the pharmacy next door. "Ah. Is my wonderful holiday over?" Amy sighed aggrievedly. She nodded at Cece, and said, "Big Sister Cece, I will come over after lunch." "All right," Cece replied with a smile, and retracted her head. "Are Big Sister Phyllis and Big Sister Raina not at home?" Amy asked doubtfully as she walked into the restaurant with Ugly Duckling in her arms. Maybe she's busy. Phyllis is in charge of the night elf's food, and Raina should be busy with the new hot pot restaurant, Mia said with a smile as she brought warm water out of the kitchen for everyone. Hannah looked around the restaurant curiously, and finally stopped in front of the mural. She saw the Twilight Forest, and also the Fog tribe that was marked as a small dot. She couldn't help but exclaim, "Is this a map of the Norland continent? Is the entire continent here?" "No, these are just some of the places." Elizabeth shook her head. "Oh." Hannah stuck out her tongue, feeling a little embarrassed for her ignorance. However, her eyes were quickly attracted by the clock on the wall. She quickly walked forward and stared at the second hand that was beating at a fixed frequency, as well as the minute and hour hands that were crawling at a slow speed. After a while, she said excitedly, "This must be the legendary clock." Using a magic formation to make the needle rotate at a fixed frequency, thus achieving the effect of timing. "I can't believe there's something so advanced here." "Big Sister Hannah, is a clock so advanced?" Amy asked doubtfully. "Of course. In order to make the needle move stably, such a small clock must have very high precision components. A slight difference could cause the clock to lose its accuracy completely." Hannah nodded as she stared at the clock as if she was looking at an exquisite piece of art. "Then, what about my watch?" Amy raised her little hand, and revealed the delicate watch with a purple diamond on her wrist. "This." Hannah stared at Amy's watch, and confirmed that the tiny needle was indeed moving, and the frequency was exactly the same as the clock on the wall. She couldn't help but exclaim, "Clocks can already be made so small. How intricate are the components inside?" She had only seen clocks once in the chief's palace. At that time, she thought it was already in existence of extremely high precision. However, it was hard to imagine what kind of master could make a watch that could be worn on the wrist. "Father gave this to me." Amy withdrew her little hand with a smile, and felt a little proud. Could it be that he's also a powerful mechanic? Hannah thought doubtfully. To her, machinery was more interesting than brewing wine. The process of designing and building a brewing machine was also more interesting than brewing wine. As long as she touched cold steel, her heart would beat faster at the thought of being able to turn it into anything she wanted in her hands. If Meg was a very powerful mechanic who could make such a small and exquisite watch, then she would have found a powerful master. Meg didn't stay in the Grey Temple for too long. He had a simple conversation with Roland about the Black Fog and the Great Old Ones, and agreed on a time to discuss this matter with Castellan Michael. As for the stone statue, Meg put it away. This thing was a little evil. Even if it was left with Roland, Meg was still a little worried. After all, he didn't have the holy light shining on it all the time. After leaving the Grey Temple, Meg hailed a carriage to return to the restaurant. When they passed by that tea house called Ben, Meg lifted the curtain to take a look, and was surprised. The tea house that was closed down was actually reopened. "What's going on?" Meg frowned. Given Bennett's crimes, a prison sentence was considered a light punishment. This tea house was his core asset, so it shouldn't be dealt with so quickly. Then, why was it reopened so quickly? The carriage continued to move forward, and Meg soon saw the hot pot restaurant that was given to Raina. There were two orcs leaning against the door, and they were chatting while stamping their feet. Are these the employees that Raina hired? Meg glanced at the two orcs who didn't look very friendly. They had gone to the Fog tribe these few days, and Raina should be busy with the renovation and opening of the restaurant. However, from the looks of it, the hot pot restaurant's finishing work hadn't been completed, and there was no construction team working on it, which made him a little puzzled. Meg planned to let Raina handle the new hot pot restaurant, and he would be a quiet investor, so he didn't ask Raina to report the progress to him. He didn't know much about the project. When the carriage was about to reach Amy's, Meg saw two young ladies walking side by side in front. He asked the coachman to stop, paid the fare, and jumped off the carriage. Raina, Phyllis. Boss. Raina and Phyllis turned around at the same time, and their eyes lit up when they saw Meg. They exclaimed in surprise, "You're back." "Yes, we just came back in the afternoon. They should be in the restaurant now." Meg walked forward with a smile, and his gaze landed on Raina's left hand, which was wrapped in a bandage. He concernedly asked, "Raina, what happened to your hand?" "I accidentally scalded myself when I was cooking." "It's not a big deal." Raina quickly hid her hand behind her back, and shook her head. "It's not like that, boss." Raina's hand was scratched when those bad orcs pushed her to the ground. Phyllis clenched her fists angrily, and looked at Meg. "They took over Raina's restaurant, said it was theirs, and didn't let us in. It's terrible." Wonderful Book House. Chapter 1582. There's such a thing. Meg looked at Raina in shock. "I should have settled this matter myself, but they..." Raina lowered her eyes guiltily. "Are they from the Marquis family?" Meg frowned. "Yes, they said the shop belongs to them, and they won't let us in." Phyllis nodded angrily. "Isn't the property deed with you? Why did they say the shop belongs to them?" Meg asked Raina. "They also have a certificate from the city lord's castle. It says that the shop belongs to the Marquis family. I went to the city lord's castle with the certificate today, but they didn't give me an accurate explanation. They only told me to come back and wait." Raina looked up at Meg with a determined gaze, and said, "I will settle this through an appeal. I believe in the city lord's castle and Chaos City's laws. I believe in them too." Meg smiled gently. He looked at Raina's hand, and said coldly, "However, since the city lord's castle is still unclear, and both parties have proof, they took over the restaurant and hurt you. This is not right. It's just a small cut. It's okay." Raina shook her head. She was already used to small cuts, and didn't take it to heart. However, Meg's attitude warmed her heart, but she didn't want to trouble him. This was what she should do. "Let's go in first. Princess Irina should be here too. Let her take a look at your wound. If there's anything, we can talk after dinner." Meg went up to open the restaurant's door, and gestured for Raina and Phyllis to enter. "The princess is back too." Phyllis's eyes lit up, and she quickly walked into the restaurant. Soon, she heard her greeting Irina. Raina followed in, and greeted everyone. Meg introduced Hannah, who had just arrived. Then, he looked at Irina, who was rubbing Ugly Duckling's chubby face, and said, "Princess Irina, please take a look at Raina's hand." Raina's hand. Everyone turned to look at Raina. "Big sister Raina, what's wrong? Did some baddies bully you?" Amy went up, and looked at Raina with concern. She clenched her little fists, and said, "If there is, tell me. I'll beat them up for you." Some baddies took over Raina's shop when no one was around. Phyllis told everyone about how the Marquis family took over the shop. Those baddies. Everyone was a little angry when they heard that, but they also looked at Raina with heartache. "It's okay. Look, it's just a small wound." Raina removed the bandage on her hand, and revealed the wound on her palm. The wound was about 2 centimeters long. It wasn't deep, but it was a little red and swollen at the moment. A scab hadn't formed yet, and it hurt just by looking at it. "You're still experimenting with the hot pot even though you're injured, right?" Meg asked as he looked at the red and swollen wound. "I'm just experimenting. I haven't confirmed the taste yet." Raina retracted her hand embarrassedly. "Although the wound is small, it hurts a little on the hand." Irina looked at Amy and said, "Amy, didn't you learn the healing spell?" "That's right. I learned the healing spell of life magic from Big Sister Irina, and I also learned the healing spell of nature magic from Big Sister Luna. If I use them together, the healing effect will be doubled." Amy nodded. She made her way over to Reina with a smile and said, "Big Sister Reina, give me your hand. I'll heal it for you." Reina saw that everyone was looking at her, and hesitated momentarily before extending her hand. Amy took out her wand and held it in her hand. She closed her eyes and began to chant a magic spell. Everyone looked at her curiously. Life magic was a spell unique to the elven race, and nature magic could only be mastered by the druids. However, Amy had learned the healing spell of these two spells at the same time, and she had even created a fusion between them. Everyone was looking forward to seeing if she could really double the healing effect. Following the conclusion of her spell, Amy pointed her wand at Reina's hand. A green light intermingled with wisps of golden light fell onto her hand and then shrouded it. The light disappeared in a flash, and when everyone focused their attention on Reina's hand again, the wound on her hand had already completely healed. There wasn't even a single scar left behind. Even the old scars that she had accidentally gotten from cooking in the past had been completely healed. Reina looked at her left hand with an expression of surprise and incredulity. "Wow, Mia's healing spell is super awesome." The wound disappeared in an instant, and there wasn't even a scar left behind, Mia exclaimed in amazement. "The fusion of nature magic and life magic is perfect. They really are mutually beneficial." A hint of surprise appeared on Elizabeth's face. Amy really was the most talented magic caster she had ever seen. Looks like the druids and elves really do have an inseparable relationship. I wonder if the god of life and the goddess of nature are related. Meg was also a little curious. He was aware that Amy was learning healing spells. He had been worried that she wouldn't be able to do both at the same time, but who would have thought that not only had she learned them, she had even managed to fuse them together without anyone teaching her. However, she could even fuse ice flames and fire flames for fun, so it wasn't too surprising that she could fuse two healing spells together. "My wound has been healed, but are we just going to let the guy who beat me off the hook?" Irina smiled as she said, "I've heard that the 4 major families of Chaos City are extremely wealthy. I wonder if that's true. If we're talking about extremely wealthy families, only the Buffett family can barely be considered as one of them. The Marquis family is also extremely wealthy, but they definitely don't lack money," Meg said with a smile. He was naturally aware of what Irina was thinking. "You guys take a rest first. I'll go and cook. After lunch, we'll go and take a look. If we're talking about fists, that'll be interesting." Meg walked towards the kitchen. Of course, he couldn't let this matter go just like that. This shop was Reina's compensation. Since the Marquis family was so shameless, he wasn't going to give in to them. After lunch, the group went out and walked towards the hot pot restaurant 500 meters away. Amy walked at the front with Ugly Duckling in her arms, looking like a big boss. "Say, do you think that woman will still come? Young Master told us not to create trouble, but if she wants to barge in, we'll still have to stop her, right? If she doesn't know what's good for her, then don't blame us for being rude. We've already told her that we're from the Marquis family, but she still wants to barge in. She's just a fool," 2 orcs mumbled as they huddled together at the entrance of the hot pot restaurant and huffed to warm their hands. "Hey, you 2 baddies. Did you bully Big Sister Reina?" Just then, a soft questioning voice sounded. The 2 orcs turned their heads at the same time when they heard the voice. They were stunned when they saw the little half-elf girl who had appeared at the entrance. "Child, who are you? Go home and play with your parents," one of the orcs said impatiently as he waved his hand. Bookhouse reading website. Chapter 1583. Sir. Amy looked at the orc and took a step back. Here, they're all here. The two orcs looked up and saw a man standing in front of them with a group of men. They were looking at them with hostility. The woman who had been causing trouble 2 days ago was also in the group. What do you want? The two orcs panicked. However, they took a look at Meg. He was a skinny and weak human who didn't look like an expert. They immediately regained their composure and said, "This is the property of the Marquis family. Don't think that you can enter just because you have more people. Look at what you're saying. This is Raina's shop. Didn't you take over the place a few days ago because you had more people?" Meg laughed sarcastically. Nonsense. Who said that this is her shop? We have the ownership statement from the Department of Property Rights. The ownership of this shop belongs to the Marquis family. The orc said seriously. He took out a piece of parchment paper with the official seal of the City Lord's Castle Property Department and showed it to Meg. He was so proud that his nose was almost pointing to the sky. I also have the property ownership certificate of the shop with the seal of the City Lord's Castle Property Department. If you suspect that my certificate is fake, you can go to the City Lord's castle to verify it. Meg also showed Raina's property ownership certificate. Humph. We won't let you in anyway. It's useless no matter what you say. The orc kept the certificate and snorted. Meg also kept the property ownership certificate and smiled. Very well. Now that we have the certificate, the owner of this shop will depend on whose fist is harder, right? Compete with our fist. The two orcs sized up Meg and laughed at the same time. I say, with your girly body, you want to compete with our fists? One of the orcs looked at Meg and mocked. Or are you going to let this little girl compete for you? Everyone looked at the two orcs as if they were looking at two idiots who didn't know what was good for them. There wasn't much anger in them. Is he going to fight? Elizabeth looked at Meg's back. She was sure that Meg wasn't an ordinary chef who only knew how to use a kitchen knife at the Falk tribe. Even Kurt was stabbed by him. Fighting with these two orcs who weren't even 6th tier was like killing 2 ants. Meg also couldn't help but laugh. He looked at Amy and said, "Since you've chosen Amy, then." Amy. Ha! The two orcs were stunned upon hearing that. They looked at Mag, and then carefully sized up the cute half-elf who was holding a kitten in her arms. The little girl appeared to be only 3 or 4 years old, and her eyes were big, and she looked very adorable. Are you still a human? The two orcs said in disdain. Amy's eyes lit up. She passed Ugly Duckling to Anna, and smiled at the two orcs. Don't worry. I'll go easy on you. Meg and the rest had already backed off, and made way for Amy to stand in front of the restaurant. The commotion over here attracted the attention of many passers-by. They were also looking at Mag with disdain. What kind of father would let his young child fight with the orcs? Wasn't he asking his child to smash his head against the wall? Is this a good idea? Raina was a little worried. She wasn't worried that Amy couldn't beat those two orcs. She was just worried that it would bring trouble to the boss and the restaurant if things got out of hand. After all, the Marquis family was still very influential in Chaos City. It's all right. Even if the City Lord's castle is arguing about this, the Great Temple won't sit back and do nothing, Meg consoled her with a smile. What are you doing? Even if it's a challenge, what's the big deal about pushing a child out? An orc said indignantly. It would be embarrassing even if he won against a 3-year-old. That's right. You're a big man, but you're hiding at the back and pushing your daughter out. How shameless can you be? The other orc was also glaring at Meg angrily. He couldn't wait to roll up his sleeves and fight with him. They were guarding the restaurant, and represented the Marquis family. They couldn't embarrass their master. "Hey, I'm your opponent." Master said that even when facing a weak enemy, we have to give them enough attention and respect. "Just like how I'm treating you now," Amy lectured them word by word with a stern face. "You." The orc lowered his head to look at Amy. He was angry and frustrated, but he didn't know how to vent his anger. "Be careful. I'm going to attack." However, before he could say anything, Amy had already whipped out her 2-meter-tall magic caster's staff, and dashed towards them. "Little brat." Although the orc was a little surprised that Amy could lift such a tall magic caster's staff, he didn't take her seriously at all. He casually reached out to grab the magic caster's staff, intending to teach this little brat a lesson. Meanwhile, the other orc stood where he was without any intention of moving at all. It would be too embarrassing if the two of them had to take action to deal with a 3-year-old brat. Bam! With a muffled sound, the orc's fan-like hand failed to grab the magic caster's staff, and the magic caster's staff slammed heavily into his face. The unexpected and terrifying power caused his face to contort instantly. How could she have such terrifying power? That was the only thought in the orc's mind as he was sent flying. Fuck. The orc next to him was shocked when he saw his companion being sent flying with a single hit. He didn't even have time to react. Hee, it's your turn. Amy's gaze fell on the orc, and she revealed an adorable smile. Looks like this little brat isn't simple. She can lift such a heavy magic caster's staff and send Benson flying so far with a single hit. However, this is also because Benson underestimated his opponent too much and didn't make any preparations. Bam! Before the beast man could complete his mental construction, he was interrupted by a blow to the head. He flew in the same direction as the previous beast man. How is this possible? The onlookers were in an uproar. They looked at the two orcs that were sent flying with a single slap, and Amy, who didn't even reach the orc's waist, in shock. What kind of great power did this little girl have to be able to send two orcs that weighed more than 100 kilograms flying so easily? Amy looked at the two orcs that were lying on the ground, but she didn't appear too happy. Instead, she lectured them seriously. Master said that we must focus during a battle and give it our all. We mustn't think too much. Anyway, if we can't beat them, we can't beat them. There's no point in thinking too much, bastard. The two orcs were lying on the ground. Their faces were filled with shame and anger, and their hearts were filled with fear. The terrifying power of the staff just now made them question their lives. They were sent flying with a single slap from a little girl of 3 or 4 years old. You're not convinced. Amy took 2 steps forward and looked at the two orcs who were struggling to get up. Then I'll give you one more chance. As she said that, she raised the magic caster's staff in her hand. After reciting a magic spell, a green light mixed with golden light fell on the two orcs. Their injuries were healed in the blink of an eye. It's healed. The two orcs got up in disbelief. Their minds were still a little dazed. I'm here again. A devilish whisper sounded in their ears. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 1584. The crowd at the shop's entrance was dumbfounded as they watched the two orcs being sent flying by Amy, then healed by a ray of light, and sent flying again. Their tragic cries reverberated in the streets, making people feel pity for them and laugh at the same time. After all, the two tall and strong orcs were so weak in front of that little girl who looked as cute as a little white rabbit. They were sent flying with a single slap, and even looked like they were putting on a show. Only the people at Mamie's knew that those two orcs were really miserable. Amy was obviously practicing her healing spell. It was not easy to find such human test subjects with such a high abominable value and thick skin. Every slap was real. It was not enough to kill them, but it was inevitable that they would be unable to move due to the injuries. And the healing spell, which was a combination of life magic and nature magic, was very effective. It could heal their injuries in a very short time, and then she could give the next slap with ease. No. Don't. Arg. Surrender. The two orcs' screams were prolonged. Their hearts were completely filled with despair at this moment. What kind of child was this? She was obviously a devil incarnate. Although she was holding a magic caster's staff, she was using it as a fire rod, and her strength was so terrifying. Isn't this the little boss of Immerse? She is the disciple of the Lord of Fire and the Lord of Ice. These two fellows actually dared to provoke her. A passerby recognized Amy, and couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. So she is the disciple of those two legendary magic casters. Everyone understood, and there was a hint of pity in their eyes as they looked at the two orcs. When the two orcs heard that, their hearts sank. How did they end up in the hands of that great ant? This was the child that should not be provoked in Chaos City. Are you convinced now? Meg asked with a smile as he looked at the two orcs who were sent flying again. I'm convinced. I'm convinced. The two orcs nodded like they were pounding garlic. They couldn't care less about the excruciating pain from being sent flying just now. They were afraid that another healing spell would land on them. So fast. Master said that we must have a backbone. We can't surrender just because we are beaten up. Amy hugged her magic caster's staff and looked at the two orcs with a look of disappointment. Why don't we fight for a while more? No, 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 no more. The two orcs got up from the ground while enduring the excruciating pain, and waved their hands fearfully. What a joke. Although they could be healed every time, the process of the injury and the pain were completely real. Even if they had bones of steel, they would not be able to. Stop. What are you doing? Right at this moment, a horse-drawn carriage with the Marquis family's emblem stopped in front of the shop. A young man alighted from the horse-drawn carriage and walked over. He glanced at the two orcs who were in a sorry state before looking at Mag with narrowed eyes. These people wanted to barge into the shop and beat us up. You have to uphold justice for us. The two orcs looked at Jonah as if they had seen their savior. The grievance they had suffered surged to their hearts, and they spoke with tears and snot. The 7 or 8 orcs who came with the carriage immediately surrounded Meg and Amy. They glared at them and were ready to attack at any time. Jonah looked at Meg, and said in a low voice, "You are Mr. Mac from Amy's, right? I hope you can give me an explanation. Why did you hurt the guards of my Marquis family for no reason? And why did you barge into my Marquis family's property for no reason?" For no reason. Meg sneered. He turned to the side to let Raina, who was standing behind him, through. He looked at Jonah and coldly said, "Then let me ask you first. Why did your 2 guards beat up my partner, Miss Raina, for no reason 2 days ago? This is clearly a property under her name, and it has the certificate of ownership stamped by the city lord's castle as proof. How did it become the property of your Marquis family? The Marquis family and this lady are fighting over property. They both said that this shop is theirs. Then, who exactly does this shop belong to? Mr. Mac said that Miss Raina has the certificate of ownership, so this shop must be hers. Isn't this the law of Chaos City?" The onlookers started whispering when they heard that. They didn't expect such a dispute to be hidden behind a seemingly random fight. "I was the one who beat them up. If you're not convinced, you can come and try." Amy placed her magic caster's staff in front of her, and crossed her arms in front of her chest. She looked at Jonah with disdain, and said, "Come here." Jonah glanced at Amy, and raised his eyebrows. However, he suppressed his anger very quickly. He knew this young lady's identity very well. If those 2 lords got angry, even the Marquis family would have to tremble. His gaze landed on Meg again. This wasn't his first time seeing Meg. He had already seen him at the Aden Chamber of Commerce's year-end celebration, but this was indeed his first time meeting him face to face. He still hadn't received any accurate information as to why the property of this shop would land in the hands of that lady named Raina. The Department of Property Rights only knew that this was specially approved by the city lord, and this property was transferred to Raina's name as a gift. This might have something to do with the Grey Temple. However, the Grey Temple had kept all information about Bennett under wraps, so he didn't get much useful information. However, he could sense that Bennett had committed an unusual crime, and there was no chance for him to turn things around. With his cautious personality, he had gone to look for his father before leaving the house in the morning and suggested giving up the shop to avoid being involved in an unknown conflict in the face of such muddy waters that he had no idea what was going on. However, Bowen didn't accept his suggestion. He wasn't worried at all about Miss Raina, who didn't seem to have any power or backing. He believed that as long as they waited for the report from the Department of Property Rights, they would be able to rightfully take over this shop. According to the current valuation, this shop was already worth more than 25 million copper coins. Furthermore, if they could follow Bennett's plan and open a hot pot restaurant, they might be able to bring in even better returns for the Marquis family. He didn't expect to bump into Meg and the rest who were there to cause trouble when he was just planning to take a look. Furthermore, the other party was clearly prepared. They were able to pull both parties to the same side just by relying on a 3-year-old girl. If that's the case, on behalf of the Marquis family, I would like to apologize on behalf of the Marquis family for the disrespect and harm that my men had caused to Miss Raina. Jonah looked at Raina and bowed solemnly. Raina looked at Meg nervously. It's all right. We've already fought back. This is more useful than an apology, Meg answered on behalf of Raina with a smile. Jonah's expression froze, and he looked at Meg with a serious expression. He had met his match. Meg also looked at Jonah with a spurious smile. The descendants of the 4 major families were indeed not all useless, but he was still too inexperienced to play this game with him. Chapter 1585. Seems like the fight just now was a misunderstanding. The 2 guards from our Marquis family have offended you in any way, and I hope this young lady can forgive them. We will also teach them well, Jonah said to Amy with a smile, displaying the bearing of a rich family's heir. After that, she turned to look at Mag. Her smile faded, and she seriously said, however, I'm afraid what Mr. Mag said isn't entirely true. I don't know why Miss Raina has the ownership certificate of this shop in her hands, because this shop originally belonged to the Marquis family. It was under Bennett's name previously, but he was arrested for personal reasons. The Marquis family will not protect or be biased toward him, but we can't let the properties and assets that belong to the Marquis family slip away. Everyone was deep in thought. If that was really the case, how did that Miss Raina get such a spacious and expensive shop? It was indeed suspicious. You can pretend that you don't know, but I'm going to tell you clearly now. Meg looked at Jonah, and coldly said, Bennett was arrested by the Grey Temple because he was involved in dozens of murders and burials in gambling dens, manufacturing and selling potions, kidnapping, and other vicious crimes. And all his assets were obtained illegally. He used them to buy many shops and properties, and used irregular means to run a few industries that he monopolized in Chaos City. These seemingly clean properties, shops, and tea houses were bought by him using his dirty money. The Marquis family should know very well about their origins, right? Do you think you can fool everyone by saying that they belong to the Marquis family? Do you think the Marquis family is omnipotent, or do you think the Grey Temple is full of fools? You. Jonah's face turned pale, and he took 2 steps back instinctively. He looked at Meg with shock and panic in his eyes. How did he know about all these? During this period, the Marquis family had spent a lot of effort and money to publicize the ownership of these properties and assets to the public, and to sever ties with Bennett. They didn't expect Meg to expose them in public. As expected, there was an uproar among the onlookers. They had only heard that the owner of the Bend tea house had been arrested, but they didn't expect it to involve such a terrifying crime. As the second master of the Marquis family, Bennett was quite well known. Now that the Marquis family wanted to take away all the properties that he had obtained illegally and claim that they belonged to the Marquis family, they were not only taking advantage of him but also trampling on the Grey Temple's reputation. Me? Am I wrong? I believe the Grey Temple will announce the results of this matter soon. If the Marquis family really has the ability to suppress this matter, then you can say that I'm spouting nonsense. Of course, I know you don't have that ability. Meg smiled and looked at the flustered Jonah. He continued, as for why the property deed of this shop is in Raina's hands, you must be puzzled, right? The Marquis family's influence really doesn't deserve to be one of the 4 major families if they can't even get such information. Jonah's face flushed red. This fellow's mouth was really too irritating. He wanted nothing more than to stuff that smacking mouth of his. Don't be too nervous. This matter is definitely not something a little kid like you can make the decision. Meg smiled and comforted him. Of course, if you really want to know why this shop belongs to Raina, you can go to the Grey Temple and ask. You don't have to be hypocritical and try to get information from them. I'll say it here today. This shop belongs to Raina now. If anyone tries to take it away and hurt her, then don't blame us for being rude. Humph. Amy. Super fierce. Amy casually continued Meg's words. She held her magic caster's staff with one hand and clenched her little fist with the other. Her big blue eyes were wide open as she spoke with a serious expression. Pfft. So cute. Oh my God. This threat. I'm actually not afraid of it. The onlookers couldn't keep their expressions straight. Jonah frowned. In this situation, he had to do something. Otherwise, it might bring trouble to the family. Little Amy, didn't you say you have classes in the afternoon? Just then, a hoarse voice came from outside. The crowd parted to make a path for an old man with half-white hair and an old magic caster's robe to walk in slowly. This is the Lord of Ice, Julian. What was supposed to be an adorable threat has suddenly become frightening. Everyone lowered their voices as they looked at Urian in awe and veneration. Jonah's expression changed instantly. He immediately looked at Meg and said, I will report this matter to my father. I believe the City Lord's castle will give a fair ruling. Before that, the Marquis family will not appear here again. After saying that, Jonah bowed respectfully to Urian, and quickly left with his subordinates. Are you leaving just like that? Let's fight for a while more, Amy said enthusiastically to Jonah and the rest. Everyone's footsteps quickened. They quickly got into the carriages and almost jogged away. Seriously, there's no one who can fight. Amy shook her head in disappointment. She turned to look at Julian, and immediately put on a cute smile. She kept her magic caster's staff, and smilingly said, Master, why are you here? I'm here to bring you to class, Julian said helplessly. All right. Anyway, the bad guys have been beaten up. I'll skip class then. Amy nodded. Then, she waved at Meg and the rest. Father, I'm going to class. Go on. Be good, Meg agreed with a smile. Amy nodded vigorously, and followed Julian in the direction of the magic potion shop. The onlookers dispersed as well. However, the matter of Bennett being arrested was bound to become a topic of conversation for many people. Julian's appearance was a strong deterrent, and successfully scared Jonah and the rest away. Meg was not worried that the city lord's castle would side with the Marquis family. Otherwise, Michael would be too much of a failure as the city lord. He would not agree. After this, no one would come to interrupt the progress of the new hot pot restaurant. They won't come again. Let's go in and take a look. Meg pushed the door open and walked in first. Everyone followed suit and entered in a line. The interior of the hot pot restaurant was rather luxurious. The main colors were gold and red. The tables and chairs were all prepared. They were all red date mahogany tables, and were neatly arranged. There were more than 100 tables in the hall on the first floor alone. The scale was more than double that of Amy's. This restaurant is so big. It can accommodate 1,000 people, right? Yabamiya exclaimed. There are private rooms on the second floor. The kitchen is also on the second floor. Reina smiled as she walked in. Let me show you. Is it over just like that? How boring. Irina, who was standing on a nearby roof, shook her head. She glanced at the carriage that was leaving, and a sly smile appeared on her face. Since you want everything, I'll skin you alive. Irina murmured to herself. Chapter 1586. Have you found a construction team? Meg asked Reina casually as he walked around the hot pot restaurant. Phyllis introduced me to a few very capable elven architects. I want to let them complete the final presentation and finishing work. The cost is 50% cheaper than the dwarven architects, and I like their design concept more. Reina nodded with a smile. That's good. Meg nodded slightly. The elves' aesthetic taste was unquestionable. It was most appropriate for them to neutralize the vulgarity brought about by the golden color of this hot pot restaurant. He continued, then you should arrange the construction as soon as possible. I will let the Grey Temple and the City Lord's Castle give you an explanation about the ownership of the restaurant. Okay. I will confirm the final plan with them at noon today, and then we will officially start the construction. Reina nodded. She looked at Meg hesitantly and said, there is one more thing that I want to discuss with you. Go ahead. That is. Reina grabbed the hem of her clothes and said hesitantly, I have been experimenting with the hot pot base these days, but when I was making the spicy hot pot base, I found that if there is no spice like Sichuan pepper, the spicy effect cannot be achieved. I can't find any spice that can replace it in the market, so I was thinking, it is indeed difficult to find a substitute for Sichuan pepper. Before you find a suitable substitute, I can provide you with Sichuan pepper, Meg said with a smile. Thank you. Reina's face lit up, but she immediately said seriously, I will pay according to the original price. Sichuan pepper was a precious spice that could not be found in the market at all, so it must be very precious. Reina naturally could not take it from Meg for free. Okay. Meg nodded. With the scale of Reina's hot pot restaurant, he really could not afford to supply it. System, didn't you say that the Sichuan pepper in your restaurant was the best of the best? Then can you sell the remaining 9,999 discarded ones to me at a low price? Meg said in his heart with a smile. Host, according to the system's principles, I don't care what your principles are. I just want you to follow my principles. As a candidate for the god of cookery, my principle is to not waste a single grain or spice. So, name your price, Meg calmly interrupted the system. 10 copper coins for one, alright, 10 copper coins per caddy, deal. I'm sure the people of this world will thank you for letting them eat a cheap and delicious spicy hot pot. Meg smiled and won the bid without hesitation. You did the right thing. I also admire your awareness of learning to be flexible. If there's money to be made, everyone can earn it. Thank me. It doesn't exist, Meg said straightforwardly. Okay. Okay, changing the food structure and habits of the other world is also one of your tasks. Reusing the spices that were originally discarded and destroyed is also a good idea. The system muttered, reluctantly accepting this result. If you want, I can provide you with 500 caddies of Sichuan peppercorns. Let's calculate it at 100 copper coins per caddy. Meg looked at Reina with a smile. 100 copper coins. Reina's eyes lit up, and she looked at Meg in disbelief. So cheap. Did you lower the price on purpose for me? You want to make hot pot of food for ordinary people, so controlling the cost of ingredients is the most important thing. Sichuan peppercorns naturally can't be too expensive. It doesn't matter if I suffer a little loss. After all, I have shares in the hot pot restaurant. Meg shook his head with a smile. Host, WQNMLGB. The system's angry roar echoed in Meg's mind. As a system, you must be civilized and not dirty. Meg stayed in the new shop for a while before taking Hannah to the factory in the north of the city. My goodness. What is this steel-like giant thing that can spit air? How can this wheel move by itself? This loom doesn't need to be moved by human hands. It's amazing. Hannah entered the factory like Granny Lou entering the Grandview garden. She touched this and looked at that, and her mouth never closed. Meg gave her a brief introduction to the theory of the steam engine, the concept of the whole textile factory, and how the workers work together to make the textile more efficient. Did you really invent the steam engine? Hannah walked out of the workshop and looked at Meg with glowing eyes, unable to hide her admiration. Yes. Meg nodded. You're so awesome. You're a genius. Hannah exclaimed. Standing on the shoulders of predecessors can always give others the wrong impression. Meg shrugged. However, Hannah didn't seem to think too much about his words. Instead, she asked curiously, are those huge machines really powered by steam? How can the floating water vapor have such great power? Yes. Don't underestimate the power of steam. They might be able to exert a more stable and long-lasting output than magic, and can be obtained at a lower price. Meg nodded with a smile. He was very satisfied with Hannah's questions that hit the nail on the head. Irina looked at the huge factory thoughtfully. After a moment of silence, her eyes lit up, and she said, so this is the so-called factory. Then, can I also turn the brewery into a huge factory like this? I can divide the brewing process into a few workshops, and let different workers be in charge of juicing, brewing, and mixing. That way, the efficiency of brewing can be greatly improved, and the production of rum can be quantified. That's why I brought you here. I will invest a sum of money to design and manufacture rum machines for you, and build a huge rum brewing factory in Chaos City. You will be in charge of controlling the quality of the rum. If you're not good at factory management and marketing, I can also find someone suitable to help you. Meg looked at Hannah with a smile, and said, what do you think? Hannah looked at Meg with her mouth slightly agape. She only swallowed her saliva after a while, and said, I came to Chaos City just to build my third-generation brewing machine, and then. Hannah thought for a while, and her gaze landed on the factory in front of her. Her eyes gradually lit up. And then, I will open a huge brewery, and let the whole world drink our old Sims rum. Very good. I will invest in this project. Meg nodded. He took out a banknote, signed it, and passed it to Hannah. This is 2 million copper coins. Take it as the initial capital for the brewery. I will add another 8 million copper coins later on. You and I will share this brewery 50-50. 50-50. Hannah held the banknote, and hesitantly said, but I only have 3 million copper coins with me. Won't you be at a disadvantage? Your ability and skills are priceless, Meg said with a smile. Wonderful book house. Chapter 1587. Is the boss of Mamie standing up for that woman? This fellow really likes to poke his nose into other people's business. He's everywhere. Bowen looked at Jonah with a frown, and said, he was also the one who messed up Cyril's matter previously. He's definitely related to Gloria. He's really a friend of women. Father, I think we have to be more cautious about this matter. It's impossible for Miss Reyna to receive this shop at such a time just because of Meg's relationship. She must have some other connections with the Grey Temple. And Meg could still find out about Bennett's crimes after the news was sealed off. I'm afraid he's also related to the Grey Temple. Bennett has already fallen into an abyss of no return, and the Grey Temple's attitude is not clear enough. I think we should give up on this shop for the time being, and even more businesses that are shady between black and white to prevent the Marquis family from being in danger, Jonah said solemnly. Ha! It's just a chef. Why do you have to be so flustered, my son? Bowen waved his hand nonchalantly and smilingly said, you don't have to worry about this. I've waited for so many years for Bennett to fall. If I don't take over all the businesses that he's worked so hard for all these years, how can I be worthy of all his hard work? But father, I know your worries. Our Marquis family has been in Chaos City for decades, and our network is far more complicated than you can imagine. How can a chef and a woman from the slums fight with us? However, as you said, this matter involves the Grey Temple, so I will be more cautious. Before the official ruling is out, I will ask them not to find trouble with us. Bowen interrupted Jonah, and waved his hand. Go and get busy. What you have to do now is to revive Ben Tea House. It's worth 100 shops. All right. Jonah nodded, and turned to leave quickly. Bowen sat alone in the room for a while before he got up and walked out. As he walked, he said, prepare the carriage. I'm going to the Grey Temple. Boss, where are we going now? In the carriage, Hannah looked at Meg and asked. She was still excited about visiting the factory. Just like Mia and the others, Hannah had changed the way she addressed Meg as boss. After all, she was now officially employed by Meg as Mamie's chief brewer. Let's go back to the restaurant. The restaurant will officially open for business tonight. There are a lot of preparations that need to be done in advance. Meg looked at Hannah and continued, in order to appease the customer's resentment, I intend to release the rum you brewed at the same time as the husband and wife long slice. But I only have old base wine left in my wine gourd, and the machines have been sold as scrap metal. There's no way to brew it, Hannah said helplessly. It's okay. I took some of your cellar wine from Connie. It's enough for the restaurant to use for a while. Also, this can be treated as a trial run for the rum. We can see the market's reaction to the rum, and provide some data for us to build the factory. Meg shook his head with a smile. Because Connie had successfully taken over the Falk tribe, he returned most of the treasures that the system had taken away. He used the rest to pay the system's custodian fee, and kept about 300 million to 500 million yuan for this trip. And in the space that the system had vacated, Meg took a few hundred barrels of Hannah's rum from Connie. He could sell them directly on the shelves when he brought them back. I see. Hannah understood, but she quickly said seriously, Boss, don't worry. I will build the third-generation brewing machine very soon, and put it into production so that there will be an endless supply of rum. There's no need to rush the manufacturing. Your third-generation brewing machine's design is indeed not bad, but there are still many details that can be polished. How to maximize the efficiency of energy and raw materials, how to make the machine operate more efficiently, and how to integrate the steam engine into the brewing process to make the whole brewing process more advanced and efficient. These are all things that can be considered. Meg looked at Hannah with a smile and said, "We will strive to make this machine more perfect." Steam engine plus brewing machine. Hannah thought seriously for a while. Her eyes lit up, and she excitedly said, "Yes. If we can integrate them, the brewing efficiency will definitely be very high. Just the extraction of sugarcane juice alone can save a lot of time. When we go back, I will give you the schematics and design of the steam engine. At the same time, I will teach you how to draw more standardized drawings so that it won't be difficult for you to connect with the blacksmith during the manufacturing stage." Meg continued. Hannah's drawings were not bad, but they were too wild. Others might not be able to understand her drawings. The more complicated the machine, the higher the requirement for precision. This aspect had to be standardized. Okay. Hannah nodded. She had no objections to Meg's arrangement at all. After seeing the steam engine textile machine today, she was completely in awe of Meg. This machine was much more complicated than the brewing machine. Meg was indeed a master of mechanics. It was only 3 in the afternoon, but there were already customers loitering in front of the restaurant. Clearly, they wanted to know if the restaurant would be open for business tonight. Meg entered the restaurant, and wrote a small blackboard to hang at the door. "Business will be resumed tonight. New products, husband and wife long slice and rum. There's wine, there's food, and I have a story. Miss, let me treat you to dinner tonight," Harrison said to a beautiful succubus lady affectionately. "I can consider it when you lose half of your weight." That succubus lady chuckled. She swung her wavy brown hair, and walked toward the back of the line. "In that case, you can only lose me." Harrison sighed, and touched his round tummy. He looked at the announcement on the small blackboard, and chuckled again. "Although this big sister is good, she can't be compared to Mr. Mac. New products are so good. He. The news of Mr. Mac's return and the reopening of Mamie's became the happiest news for all the foodies in Chaos City today. Of course, apart from the much-anticipated husband and wife long slice, the rum had also attracted the attention of many alcohol lovers by launching 2 new products at once. Rum? Isn't that the specialty of the Fog tribe in the Twilight Forest? Mr. Mac went to the Fog tribe, and even brought back a specialty product for everyone to try. I also heard that the Fog tribe's rum is rather famous in the Twilight Forest, and the rum brewed by the master brewer, Old Sim, is the best. An old friend brought me a small flask of it back then. That taste. TSK. It's amazing." Storyteller Carl smacked his lips with a smile, and said, "I wonder if the rum Mr. Mac brought back is as good as the flask I had back then. It has to be the best for Mr. Mac to launch it as a new product," someone replied. "That might not be the case. You guys don't know how proud that Master Old Sim is. I wanted to buy a bottle of rum that he brewed himself back then, and asked many people for help, but I couldn't get it. It's impossible for Mr. Mac to buy Master Old Sim's rum to sell," Old Carl said with certainty as he waved his hand. Chapter 1588. Old Carl had been a storyteller in the Aden Square for over a decade, but he didn't make a living from this. He worked in the city lord's castle for his whole life when he was young, and retired at 60. Storytelling was just a hobby that he enjoyed in his spare time. However, even though it was a hobby, he had made it a specialty that others couldn't learn. With his interesting and rich stories, he kept up with the hot news, and became the most beloved storyteller in the Aden Square, and even in the whole of Chaos City. Of course, after working in the city lord's castle for so many years, he could still hear things that ordinary people couldn't even hear after he retired. So, when he said that, it became a story. Therefore, old Carl was recognized as a knowledgeable person. Hearing him praising rum in such a manner, many wine lovers also revealed expressions of interest. Old Mr. Carl is right. When I went to the Falk tribe to do business last year, it was simply too difficult to buy Master Old Sim's rum. All of it was taken by the royal family and nobles, so there was very little circulating in the market, a goblin said in a low voice. He then lowered his voice and continued, "It's even harder now. There's a coup in the Falk tribe, and the merchants don't dare to go there anymore. The price of ordinary rum in the market has skyrocketed, and it's frighteningly high. Fake rum is everywhere. It's not easy to drink real rum now. Even if it's not brewed by Master Old Sim, as long as Mr. Mac could bring back rum that originated from the Falk tribe, it would be much better than those rum that we don't know where it came from in the market," old Carl lamented. Apart from storytelling, drinking was his second favorite hobby. When he was drinking with his old friend last night, he heard that something big had happened in the Falk tribe these few days. The princess who was wandering outside had returned to the tribe, killed the Kingslayer Gary, exposed her elder brother's evil deeds, ascended to the throne, and became the first female chief of the Falk tribe. He hadn't come across such a good story in a long time. It was only slightly better than Irina leading the night elves out of the Wind Forest and migrating thousands of miles to Chaos City. He had the story, but how to tell it brilliantly was the most challenging thing for a storyteller. Such a complicated and exciting story perfectly continued the story of the Kingslayer and the Brothers Layer that he told last month. This godlike twist and development was really unexpected. He was prepared to spend half a month or even a month to polish the story and script. Of course, if he had some good alcohol at this time, he might be able to get some inspiration. That was why he had specially come to Mamie's to drink today. Since they had launched rum, of course he had to give it a try. It wasn't just the drinkers. Mamie's was closed for 4 days, which made many of the regular customers who treated Mamie's as their own cafeteria cry. "Phew, Uncle, look at you. If you came a little later, we wouldn't be able to eat hot pot tonight." Vanessa pulled Abraham to the back of the line and stood on her tiptoes to count the number of people. She heaved a sigh of relief after making sure that they could eat. These guys are really early." Abraham panted heavily. The carriage had stopped 500 meters away, and he had to jog for such a long distance. It was really killing him. Life is so short. Missing a meal means one less meal. "Of course, we have to be early," Vanessa said matter-of-factly. She looked in the direction of the restaurant, and enviously said, "I'm still envious of the ladies in the restaurant. They don't have to line up every day, and they don't miss out on any of the 3 meals a day. They are so blessed. They are so busy with work. They have so many customers to entertain, but all you see is food," Abraham said with a smile. "That's true." Vanessa stuck out her little tongue embarrassedly. If it were her, she definitely wouldn't be able to do it. She was too clumsy. "Bro, we just ate Mr. Mac's delicacies at the Falk tribe 2 days ago, and we can eat them again in Chaos City." "What a seamless connection," Harris said in his tribal language with a chuckle as he stood beside Haga. Haga only chuckled, and didn't say anything. He looked in the direction of the restaurant with anticipation. Chapman stood behind Harris, and softly asked, "Master, Grand Master is back. Do you still want to learn how to cook from him?" "Of course. I haven't even mastered the husband and wife long slice yet. Wouldn't I be ruining my master's reputation if I went out?" Harris said matter-of-factly. "But I've already learned it," Chapman said hesitantly. Harris. "Master, that's not what I meant. I'm just saying that I can teach you a little if you need." Chapman quickly waved his hands. "Great, you rascal. You even want to be my master now," Harris said with a huff. "And no." Chapman was so anxious that sweat was breaking out on his forehead. Alright, I'm just teasing you, Harris said with a smile. Let's not talk about other things. I've learned a lot from tasting different delicacies here every day. To me, it's already better than traveling thousands of miles. I've been walking for so long, and it's time for me to take a break. I can't find a restaurant like this anywhere else that can continuously surprise me. Chapman looked at Harris's side profile and nodded thoughtfully. It was only halfway through winter in Chaos City. Apart from some species that weren't afraid of the cold, most of the customers were wrapped in thick cotton-padded jackets. In this kind of weather, it was naturally the best to meet up for hot pot. The customers who were eating the hot pot were lining up separately, and their popularity was not inferior to the customers who were having a normal dinner. Although the hot pot is delicious, it's a little expensive. After this meal, I can only say goodbye to the hot pot with tears in my eyes, a young man lamented. Yes. If it could be cheaper, I would have brought my whole family here too. Now, I even have to control myself when choosing the dishes, a middle-aged man lamented. There are a few cheap hot pot restaurants up ahead. Their prices are not even a third of Mamie's, but the taste. I regret meeting Mamie for the rest of my life, a young white-collar lady said with a smile. Sigh. I've been to those hot pot restaurants for the past 2 days. I only learned some superficial skills from those hot pot restaurants. They can't even cook the bone broth well. If boiled vegetables can be called hot pot, then my mom would have been a chef 20 years ago, Harrison said with pursed lips with disdain written all over his face. Everyone couldn't help but laugh when they heard that. If they weren't particular about the taste, they wouldn't have come an hour earlier to wait in the cold wind. Welcome, Mamie's. Just then, the restaurant's door opened, and Meg walked out first. He stood at the door with a smile and said, "The restaurant is open now. Please come in." The customers greeted Meg with a smile and filed in. "Mr. Mack, did you bring this rum back from the Fok tribe?" a customer asked curiously when he entered. "Of course. Old Sim's rum." "You deserve it," Meg said with a smile. Wonderful book house. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.